Motion by Jack, seconded by Joan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Any changes to the agenda?
As written tonight.
Okay. A motion to approve the agenda, please.
So second.
Okay. Dave is seconded by Jack. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item 8. Tonight is a public listening session. Several times, we have a listening session every month for items that are on the agenda, but 4 times a year, this being one of those times. We also offer opportunities for members of the public to comment on other issues that they would like to share with respect to the operation and management of their school district. I don't have any sheets in front of me indicating that somebody wishes to speak. Anybody out there? If not, that is one of the opportunities that the public has in order to provide input into the operation of their district. So thank you very much. On to item 9, administrative reports. Starting with, we have 2 student representatives, Amanda Koenig and Michaela Ripp. This is your time. Welcome.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Like she said, we're from the student council at the high school, and we're still getting to the new school year. We've only had 1 meeting so far, but we have some upcoming plans this month, and we're starting off with Coats for Kids at the football game this Friday, and we're just collecting coats at both gates.
And then also we wanted to do a music and memory fundraiser where you just collect like iPods and like old electronics, and then we haven't decided on where we want to donate that to yet, but we'll probably decide that soon and get that going.
And then every year too around homecoming we do spirit chains, so the different classes compete against each other and try to have the longest spirit chain that we present at the pep rally. And this year we're thinking of donating that money to Isabel Denai. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, but she's a junior at the high school who has been at the Waunakee Children's Hospital for a while now with a lot of different medical conditions. So we're trying to help her and her family out.
And then just some more upcoming events that we want to do that we've done in the past that have been successful are Trick or Can that we usually do on Halloween, just collecting cans and then we sort them and donate them. And then we want to do a volleyball tournament where we will decide on somewhere to donate, and then we'll set up teams and then they'll compete, and then we'll raise money for a charity. And then also we'll have an open mic night where people can just, if you want to come and sing, like dance, whatever you want to do, play an instrument, that you can come and just do that. And then we just want to do a parking raffle too, where we have like a spot in the front of the school, and then we raise money, and then whoever can get that like closest spot, we take a raffle, and then one person can get that for a whole month. So
And it's really nice during winter because then the snow is so it's pretty nice.
So yeah, that's pretty much all we have going on right now. It's just more upcoming things. We haven't really done anything yet. So.
Okay. And what does Julie?
I have a question. What was that old technology stuff? Are you looking for working vintage technology?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Or like iTunes stuff too.
Yeah, like iTunes cards.
Yeah, just kind of iPods.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a question on the same thing. It's called Music and Memory?
Yeah.
Okay, reason for the title is?
Goes with Alzheimer's patients.
I was wondering about,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I was curious, because there's so much research in that area, and it's,
I think it's a program where you can collect things that aren't being used, and then they use them with Alzheimer's patients for music.
oh, wow.
So would you like be looking for old LPs, old vinyl albums and stuff like that?
They were looking for like old iPods.
We can double check with
More-
someone.
I guess it's
Or
be
the
more
technology
portable.
itself?
Yeah.
And portable one-on-one.
Okay.
We didn't do like much talking on it, but we just introduced it.
Okay.
There was one that came to Mr. Kirsten and I this summer, and we talked about it, and I think we kicked it over in
Okay.
that direction. Somebody
Yeah, we
else
can-
something with the
we're gonna-
Alzheimer's Association.
Yeah, meet up soon again, so we can talk more about that.
Yeah, that'd be a cool one to see kind of how it goes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely update you guys on all the events.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Oh, we look forward to your reports each month.
Yeah, last week I had the opportunity to sit down with Amanda and Michaela, and we just kind of touched base about what this whole gig was like for them. But I also shared with them 2 things. One is that we'd like to probably at some point use them as a conduit to talk to more students. just to kind of have some of those dialogues. And two, that if there's things that the board may want to learn about that are happening in their world, that we can just let me know, let them know during their reports, and they can kind of go back and find out some info and bring that kind of insight back to us.
For sure.
Now, how often are your meetings then with?
It really depends on like what we have going on. Like if we have a big event, then we'll like schedule one for the week and then just go over and like plan for that. But
Yeah, usually before we had contact time, like our schedule, we'd have to take, like just a random class. We have to miss class for our meetings usually, but now that we have that contact time, it's a lot easier for us to get together, so we have more frequent meetings now, but yeah, usually, I would probably say 2 or 3 a month.
Yeah.
Unless
Okay, but it's at minimum once a month or the group.
Oh, yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
right.
yeah.
Okay. Great, well, thank you very much.
Good job, girls.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, item B, board reports. Anything that anybody wants to share from their experiences? Joan?
I had the opportunity, and it really was quite a delightful opportunity to attend the PLC conference at the beginning of August. I just want to share a little bit of kind of perspective and kind of what I gleaned from that experience. So I guess before I went, I kind of thought I knew what a PLC was. I thought, oh yeah, we get teachers together, they collaborate, so there's consistency in the classroom, and that's it. Until you go to this conference, until you hear these speakers, you just really have no idea the depth and the strength of this kind of, it's a movement. It's just not something that happens at 8:45 with the first graders. It's a change and a redefine of how you teach and the whole profession. It was by far, it moved me immensely to think about how we educate, what we do, and why we do things. And the focus on student achievement and keeping that in the forefront of, the collaboration is not just to get the task done, but it's really to examine how we can maximize student achievement with all of our powers that we have sitting in our building. So it really was a wonderful experience. And later, you kind of ruminate over it a couple weeks, and it places different pieces of your brain together. And I was reading the newspaper about a week ago, and it had nothing to do with a PLC, but this phrase kind of jumped out, and I go, that's it, that's what a PLC is. And it says, we are only better when we're all better. Anyway, if you ever have the opportunity, you really need to hear these people.
Thank you. We've had 4 board members, I think, attend now. And how many staff, I know that we're trying to introduce it to.
That we're over, what, a third of our staff? What do you think, Tim?
I'd say we're probably around 40, we've had some.
40%?
I'd say probably around 40%.
It's remarkable. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tim. Thanks for going.
Any other board reports? And thanks to everyone who helped out with the first days of school. That was an interesting event, and everybody's excited, so. Okay, on to the second item, Joint Review Board, TIF number 8 update.
Well, the board convened today and then set a meeting for roughly a month from now.
October 17th.
October 17th?
Yep.
It will be the next meeting, which they'll be voting whether to say yes or no to the TIF, probably. Tonight, the Planning Commission voted 3-2 to approve it, so it was a tight vote. The village board will take it up next, based on that recommendation. There were a lot of people at the hearing tonight, and basically it kind of broke down into 2 camps. Those who were in favor of the TIF had two basic reasons. One was the area looks the buildings look horrible. We all know the buildings we're talking about, the south side of Verleen, just east of Madison Street. And it was, the area looked horrible. The other main concern was too many police calls and the two gun incidents last year. The people who were opposed to the TIF were mainly opposed to it based on some comments were that basically it's like, well, yeah, it's blighted, but it's getting slowly fixed up and you could continue doing that. Why get rid of the very little low-income housing we have in the community? And the other was, nobody has any idea what's going to happen to the people who have to move out. The only thing said was that they're allowed to stay until the end of the last lease, which was June or July of 2017. All of them would be allowed to stay to that point. And after that, it's over. The numbers weren't in the report you had tonight, but basically the TIF district that's created would be $980,000, up to $980,000, which is a direct give to the developer. Then the following year would be $400,000 in road improvements in the Verleen area and in that, what's that called behind it? The alleyway behind it where some of the parking would be. So it's basically about 1.4 million total. The acres say they would sell the properties when they're done. There'd be 11 condos, and they would sell for $300,000 a piece, so it'd be 3.3 million. So you're putting a 1.4 TIF on a 3.3 million property. There would be one thing that you're allowed that isn't TIF is about relocation, and there is no, as it says in the document now, there is no allocation or foreseen relocation. So basically, they're not putting anything into helping the families where they're going to end up.
There are a number of the families at the meeting tonight too.
Yeah, there were at least, I'd say, 3 to 4 families were directly there. From my understanding, there's 11 of our students live in those 10 units. Basically, the biggest statement by the families were, there is no housing in this rate anywhere in Waunakee. And they were asking, would we be given opportunity to buy the property? Oh yeah, at $300,000. The properties now are valued around $120,000. So they're paying rent on a $120,000 property. The odds of them being able to afford a $300,000 property is pretty minimal.
How many units are there now?
10.
There's 10 now, yes, so it'd be much.
5 properties, 10 rentals.
Yep.
Yeah, 5 properties, 10 rental
Right,
units.
Right, each property was about 210 to 220 in value, I thought. I read that. And then isn't the one other thing I just to make sure we got it right, or I got it right, with the TIF is the acres would borrow the money and the TIF would be paying them so much a year.
Right. They called it pay-as-you-go, but this is not the normal pay-as-you-go as I've seen. Basically, the acres front they front all the money ahead, the $980,000,
Yep.
and then the village pays them back about $50,000 to $60,000 a year as the properties go up, until they pay them back the full $980,000.
Right. A little different
That's the
than
way
the
it's
other way,
supposed to work.
where they just give them.
Yeah. My only question with that, which will probably come up at the next hearing, is my one question on that would be, what if it doesn't appraise out and go up in value as much as you think? Who's on the hook for the money in the end? It's sort of like our downtown district didn't pay off in time.
Yep.
Now what do you do?
Yep.
You know, because pay-as-you-go would say that should never be able to happen, but under this system, I think it can happen.
It's a 27-year payoff, is that right?
Yep, it was the full 27 too. It wasn't like anything could be shortened.
Well, it should be faster, because if everything's according to the statisticians or CPAs, as you want to call them, they did do it at a 1% growth, which is extremely low for Waunakee. So it should be better than that. But my only thing is, if the property doesn't appraise out at the beginning amount, now that's where your real problem is, because then no amount of growth is going to save it. So But Zellner was very tough on saying that this is only approving a maximum amount. It doesn't even commit us to acre. It doesn't commit it to that exact development. It just says up to this amount. But
It's still a third of, if you're doing almost anything. What did the neighbors say that were around there to this?
it was mixed. Some of the neighbors say they're afraid and they want something done. Some of the neighbors were saying it's not right to force these people to move out. That was a little bit split as to favoring or disapproving it.
I just drove by there yesterday. It is cleaned up by whatever. The buildings are what they are. They're 40 years old, and it is what it is. That was a different kind of development to start with.
Well, I think that was addressed by the village when we had our meeting with them. They talked about how they had been doing enforcement and getting it into compliance with the village. Zellner made that a big point as to why he's doing this, is that because it's blighted. That just makes me worry, what's the next blighted district
That's
of
right.
Waunakee?
Who's defining?
I just have one quick question. Did you say that the next meeting was the 17th?
That will be the next meeting for the joint review board.
Okay.
The village will be meeting on it, I want to say in about a week or two.
No, you're the joint review.
But I'm on the
board.
joint review board.
Okay, because that's the night of our annual meeting too, so.
Right, the meeting will be at 4 o'clock, so
Got it.
hopefully we'll be done.
Yeah.
Joint review board usually doesn't want us very
But
long.
the village meets at the end of September, if I'm correct. It's
Yeah.
on the 26th or something in there.
Well, and I know that, basically, things like this have come up in the past. We've provided kind of some opinions to Representative Dave in terms of, since he represents us, I don't know how many, and the opportunity to read the materials. I have a kind of feeling at this point, how do you want to move forward with that?
We'll have another board meeting before Dave has to put his vote
Okay.
forward. That's correct, I think. So I think if there's questions that you certainly have, that could be some things that we can dig into between now and the October board meeting. So if there's questions that arise that you'd like to have some answers to, we can find those, and then this could be back on the agenda for our October board meeting, which
Okay, it should be.
be fine, and that would give.
Like the questions you sent me.
Yes.
We did have basically our discussion with the village before this meeting actually answered most of that, which was there is no plan for relocation.
Yeah, and we have 11 students, K through 12 there.
For our interest, we looked up currently, we have 11 school-aged kids. That doesn't count any kids that are under school age.
Yep, yep.
So currently enrolled, we have 11 students
Yep, and
across
then
the 5 properties, the 10 rentals.
You have 11,
Okay, first of all, yeah.
11 students.
10 buildings.
Purchase a property, and that's why or are they just a developer that expressed an interest?
They're a developer, and I'm not sure if they expressed the interest or if the village went to them. That was never clear.
My understanding is the village has proposed this property to other developers, and that this is one opportunity that's come forward, that it could be possible to accomplish this, but it would require TIF assistance. So that was their but-for test, was saying that without the TIF assistance, there's not the interest of the developers to do what they're looking for.
Oh, so the village is looking for, okay.
So is it the village that's going to purchase the property? Is that the whole?
No, my understanding is the acres already have
They have offers.
general commitments from all 5 of the current owners, of which only one actually lives there, to be willing to sell the property, and the acres will buy the property. The village will just grant them that amount of money. Well, they'll get their money over time off, basically property tax payments will be given back to them. Is basically the way it'll work.
Is there going to be any, I have no idea what the inventory of certain housing, available housing, either purchase or rental units are in the village. And are there plans to provide any kind of market evaluation or situation assessment of housing in the village to say that this is
Needed.
needed?
You
You know where I'm going with this. I mean, I
Yes.
think that it's unfortunate.
Gary probably has
Yeah.
the best knowledge of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
There is some insight.
Okay.
I can tell you, there's market, you're talking about, right now, 10 units, basically. There's places on Knightsbridge, there's places I own, there's places on Division Street, there's places on O'Malley Street. There's some of that housing in town already. It isn't like it's the only place that has some of that. And everybody else has the issues that happen there. I have a problem with all this because if you're gonna go in and as soon as they have an incident with a gun with the same person twice, as I hear of it, that could happen in any apartment building
Amen.
anywhere in town.
Amen.
So are they gonna rush into every place and
Amen.
then all of a sudden this is a blighted area because I own 32 units up by Sunset Lane that has had some history of that. We've got it in a good place right now, but that doesn't mean there's 64 units there. That doesn't mean somebody couldn't do something. And until you go through the court system to take care of some of that, it takes a while. Or what is your enforcement value? It all by because of what our legislators have created and how you can get rid of people and how you can do all that. So, is there that housing in town? Yes, there is some of that. Is there a lot that isn't? Yeah, that's true too. And so I look at it and I go, well, they're offering to bring in some different housing. Yes, we'll lose 11 students, but we'll probably gain that many. Now, are you displacing people that there is a limited amount, probably,
That's the
of
question.
housing? That's true.
I think the biggest statement I heard was that those units being 4-bedroom make them more rare in Waunakee.
That's true, and I don't know what their rents are exactly.
Well, see, and that's
I'm gonna
just
assume
it.
they're in line kind of with what I'm at now, but I don't know that for sure.
Because I see.
From my
If their
understanding,
rents were much higher, those property values would be higher, that's all. I'm
the
saying.
couple of families that were there that spoke said that this was basically their one choice in Waunakee.
For a
Now, I
4-bedroom with
don't know
whatever,
if
that's
they're
probably
the
true.
only, how much they've looked or how hard they've looked, but several families said the same, basically the same.
Yeah.
Mark,
Dave, a question I have, if it's blighted, has there been any discussion about the city condemning the property and then selling it after condemnation? Because from my father's days on the council where we live, I know the city would actually condemn property and then sell it. If it's truly blighted, I guess I'm wondering why isn't that, or is the building itself not blighted, it's just a.
My understanding is the village has been, over time, recently, ever since the gun incident,
Right.
been going after the owners to upkeep their property, and some of them have been doing it. Now they've all stopped though, because of this TIF. Why should they put money in the property if you're just gonna?
They have an
Take
extension
it down.
until to see how this comes
Right.
out.
But I'm also getting the impression that the concept of blighted and the idea of condemning it is different than the concept of blighted in a TIF.
And what was
There
the
it is.
term?
And-
They're using a different term, Dave. They're using
It's a-
rehabilitation district.
Rehabilitation
Yeah.
Conservation District.
Yeah.
And so they throw the word blighted out there, but actually what they're doing in a TIF is a different concept.
So if we have any additional questions? or
Any
thoughts?
questions, I think you can just funnel them to me. I'll get them to Dave.
Okay.
And then if there's some of them, we at least can dig into those. And if you just copy Steve as well, if they're into the financial aspects, we can then get a sense
Will we
of
know
what
the
we're-
impact on tax base by our next meeting so that we could, prior to the Kilkenny, we knew what the impact actually would be?
I
Will we
think
see
we've
that?
got some of
They've
those.
actually already
Report,
published
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It wasn't in your packet, but it was
Okay.
given out to the committee tonight.
Okay.
So I could just give this to Steve or Randy and have them copy and
That'd be
get it to
helpful.
everybody.
Yep.
Help us understand what the numbers mean.
Sure.
Great. Okay, thank you
Thanks, Dave.
for presenting this. Okay, on to administrative reports, starting with curriculum.
All right. Our curriculum report tonight is an update from Tim Schell. So I'll turn it over to you, Tim.
So this is, our fall testing and assessment report. This is a report that you usually get at your September meeting. And historically, it's included the information on the graduate ACT report, which is something that comes out to us as a public release in August, as well as our AP testing results. And so that's going to be the main focus tonight. It also kind of just serves as kind of a recap of where we are at in terms of getting our large-scale assessment results back. And we have the graduate report in this presentation tonight. We'll talk about that in a minute. Our spring state ACT results of all of our juniors, we've had those results for a few months now, but they're still embargoed, and we can't share those in an open meeting yet.
Tim, why is that, I see embargoed on there a number of times?
Because we do not have permission from DPI to release them yet. I think in some respects, even though we have results, they're reluctant to have them just pending any residual error corrections that are going on, comparing this school, this district, vice versa across the state. I will say that we have been told since I put this together for Board Book that we will be getting embargoed school and district accountability report cards later this month, towards the end of the month, and DPI is pointing to a public release of the school and district accountability report cards on October 31st. And since all of these assessment data contribute towards those report cards, I would suspect when we do our, trick or treat, I would expect that when we have our November meeting, we'll be able to kind of share all of that with you, and I'll be off embargo at that time. So the ACT results, these are the graduate results. This is a report that has been around for a long time. This is a report that ACT releases as part of a national ACT reporting program. So ACT will, in mid-August, release a condition of the nation report that talks about the graduates of whatever the year we're in. So in this case, it's the class of 2016, how their ACT results compared with previous years and what the trends are. ACT then produces a state-level report. And here in Wisconsin, that's when ACT and DPI would traditionally release our graduate reports for all of the high schools, which before we had ACT as a part of state testing was the only real, high-profile ACT result, and the only one that ever went into report cards or anything like that for the state. And what this report is it looks at the last ACT test event for every member of the graduating class. Now, what's different about the class of 2016, if you remember, is this is the first graduating class in Wisconsin, and certainly Waunakee's first graduating class, where almost all of the kids took the ACT as juniors in March of their junior year. It doesn't mean that the graduate report is identical to how they did as juniors, because many of those students who took the ACT on the statewide testing day as juniors in March 2015 went on to take the ACT at their own family's expense later times. Lots of kids take the ACT 2, sometimes 4 times. And if they had a higher score on a later test event, which, if you think about March of your junior year to, say, September, December of your senior year, you might expect some growth. That's reflected in the graduate results. So our composite score average for the graduate was a few tenths of a point higher than it was when they tested as juniors statewide. So, not surprisingly, our participation rate was an all-time high. The reason for that is this is a high school accountability measure. It's part of the state assessment system. It's really viewed as part of the high school accountability system. But I think that we all know that student performance on the ACT is really the accumulation of all of their learning on things that the ACT measures up through high school. So it reflects elementary school learning when they came through the elementary schools, intermediate, middle school, and then the high school piece. So one of the ways we look at ACT data is we look at what percent of the students tested meet certain benchmarks that ACT has worked with colleges and universities on that are statistical measures. And nationally, and again, different campuses have, different degrees of rigor, but in general, a student that reaches the benchmark, whether it's 18 in English, 22 in math, 22 in reading, or 23 in science, they have a 50% chance statistically of a B or better in the corresponding freshman year class in college, or a 75% chance of a C or better. That's how ACT determines the college readiness link. The purple stack is Waunakee. The red stack is Wisconsin. This is for the class of 2016. And then the final one on the right is the percentage of graduates meeting all 4 of the readiness benchmarks. And you can see that our students significantly outperform their peers statewide. Now, just because a lot more students hit benchmark in English as opposed to, say, science, that doesn't necessarily mean that our science program or the state science program is not as strong as our English program. If you'll notice, the cut score is a lot lower, and so that's really the biggest factor that contributes to the percent of kids meeting the benchmarks. Now, another thing that we talked about last year, and I kind of want to bring it back into kind of the front ground here, is that historically we had between 70 and 76% of our students participate in the ACT back when it was a voluntary assessment. With the increase to almost universal testing, except for a few kids who opted out or had very significant disabilities, we expected 2 things to happen. We expected the average score to go down because the kids being brought into the pool were probably kids who weren't looking at taking the ACT before, and we, in many cases, they probably would have projected to have lower scores. The second thing is just the opportunity, given the strength of our program, just the opportunity to participate in the ACT for those kids that might historically have not participated meant that our counts of kids meeting the readiness benchmark was almost certain to increase. And as you can see, the rightmost, kind of the pale lilac there, for each of the 4 benchmarks, our percentage meeting the benchmark increased, and that's because of more kids having the opportunity to demonstrate meeting the benchmark. So that's good news, and we kind of expected that. The other thing, of course, that we expected, if you look at, there's 2 thick lines here. The dark purple line is the average composite score, and you can see that went down, and we would expect that going from, say, 75% of our kids participating to 96%. And of course, you can see the bold pink line, which is the participation rate, took a jump. Now the jump is looking a little bigger than it really is on both axes, just because we've kind of shortened them to better show the difference. Moving on to our advanced placement, you can see a few different things here. So the yellow line is our count of students taking AP tests. The green line is the percentage of students taking AP tests that got at least 1 3 or better. And then the red line is the count of total exams. And so you can see more total exams taken by more kids, and the overall level of kids reaching that 3 or better on the AP has been remarkably constant for the last 5 years or so, even as we've had more kids and more exams completed. So just in closing, and we've talked about assessment for some of the past months, and it's certainly going to be something that we'll be touching on again as we have some work done with our staff committees. One of our big goals for this year is to review our overall assessment program with particular looks at how much time is being devoted to assessment that's within our control. So, it's really a voluntary thing that kids decide to participate in AP, and the ACT is a mandated state assessment. But then we would look at other parts of our district assessment program that we have more influence over. How much time does that take, and how are we using that information? So we're going to be looking at that with the staff committee. The other thing, just by way of background, this is really, there are a few small changes in the state assessment system this year, but this is really the first time in the last 3 years there's been no major change in the state assessment system. The last 3 years have been very busy, new tests, every year. So this is a little bit more of a out of the white water, kind of into the calm water, at least on the state testing program. So with that, any questions on the report? If not, rest assured, we're going to cover assessment in probably more detail for results in November, and we're going to have the committee coming forward later this year.
I think Mark just indicated.
I was just going to suggest that, or ask, once the tests are available for the community, will you be providing some sort of interpretation for them in the paper when it comes out? I mean, I've been contacted by 2 people, just informally, about their concern about they saw the ACT scores dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to set them straight on that thing, but to me that's could be a huge concern with some in our community if they don't really understand what you just explained tonight.
Mm-hmm. Typically when we get new assessment information, whether it's, it could be Roberta, it could be Peter, sit down with Roberta and Peter and go over the results, and I think, typically they do a real nice job of reporting them. But some of the context of, we've probably had about a 20-25% increase in the number of kids taking it. Sometimes that can, when the reader sees it, that might be something that they gloss over a little bit. So I think once we get all of our assessment results able to come off of embargo in a few months here, we're certainly going to put something on the district website. Now, in talking with the Tribune, we'll see how the Tribune wants to carry that.
But I think your point, Mark, is well taken, that we're
Yes.
just looking at trying to see, in addition to getting our info out there, but putting some context to what's occurred this year that's different. And I agree with Tim. One of our things people probably be reaching out to you is just trying to have a conversation about what's happening with some of the different changes and how does that impact statistically some of the things that are occurring.
Well, let's hope that they do the same thing with the state general coverage, where they do all of their little comparisons, and hopefully there'll be a little footnote that says, just so you know, there was a change this year, and you'll see. Yeah.
And you saw some of that when the state level data was released. Now, what happened with the graduate release is that it became public, so I was able to talk about it with Peter and Roberta. Same with every other school district in the county, but DPI did not present, they presented state numbers. They didn't provide easily accessible, and they still haven't, easily accessible data for the public on all of the high schools in the state. Presumably that'll come out sometime soon. Any other questions?
More to come.
More to come. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, HR and student services.
So Connie and Kurt have the reports in your packet, so I'll just ask both of them to come up. See, Connie's the first one at the mic tonight. So if there's...
So you've all had an opportunity to see the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you have. I know we touched on a little bit of it as we went over some staffing items in closed session. Anybody?
Well, what I would like to, I know we talked about this in closed session, but also highlight in open session is the fact that we have teachers who had left who want to come back.
Yeah, I think that speaks very highly of the district.
Yes, it's wonderful.
The one thing, and maybe we talked about close, sorry, the statement about signing bonuses, with the concept of people having to pay money if they resign early from another school district. Did you have anyone turn down a position you offered to just because of that? Because they were getting it somewhere else?
No.
So it hasn't really impacted hiring yet, but you're seeing more of it?
It has not impacted our ability to hire somebody. We've had more teachers, when we've made an offer, ask us if we would be willing to pay their late resignation fee to break their contract with another district, and that is something that we have not done.
That nobody has refused. That wasn't a deal breaker for the negotiations.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Great. Kurt?
Similarly, you have my information in your packets. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. I am going to give you one more chart. Julie had asked a question about numbers of 504 plans and IEP plans in the district, and I just compiled that to share with her, and I'll just share it with everyone.
I actually did have a couple questions and thought I had said send on my email before I left on Friday, but I didn't, so I saw it in my draft mailbox. And it just has to do with making sure I can interpret the information correctly on the
Sure.
chart.
You're looking at the
Seclusion and restraint.
chart? Yep.
Yeah, are the numbers mutually exclusive events, or can one incident where can they be both seclusion and restraint? I mean, or are they just mutually?
They could be both. One incident could be both.
Okay.
If they had to be physically restrained before
Yes.
they secluded them, it would count as a physical restraint and a seclusion.
Okay. And then in a couple of cases, and maybe I think I remembered the first year you had to report this, is that, like for Arboretum and high school, I think were the two that I saw, can one incident have multiple students, or was it just the way the data was?
It could have multiple students, depending on the incident. If there was a fight, for example, you may
Yeah.
have two students fighting, both students get physically restrained, so that would count as two.
Okay, yeah, okay. And then I noticed, some, current numbers represent quite a change, like fewer incidences in some of the elementaries. And so my question is, do you think it's kind of a function of a change in practice and populations or something else, because
I think it's a combination of things. I think it is students moving from an elementary building to the intermediate building. I think that created some of that difference. I also think it's a combination of some of the staff members attending our nonviolent crisis intervention trainings and learning the components on the front end of that training, which is all about de-escalating a situation as opposed to physically restraining, although that's part of the training. But I think refreshing people's memory. Again, I don't think any of that information is new. I just think it's refreshing staff members' training that they maybe had many years ago of how do you de-escalate a situation, or at least not contribute to its escalation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is a state-required report.
It is.
Yeah.
It's required by September 1, actually. I do it
Okay.
at the September board meeting. So.
The one thing, the number of students in that report, that would be the number of students involved in these seclusions or restraints.
Correct.
But each student, if two students were involved in an incident and they were both secluded, you'd have two students and two seclusions, right?
That is correct.
So I guess I don't understand the very top one then, that had a total of 73 seclusions and restraints, but a total of 75 students.
Yep.
How does that number get higher than the other two?
Yeah, well, some of the students, while they're involved in the incident, aren't secluded or restrained.
Oh, so they're involved in an incident that led to a seclusion or restraint.
Or were the victim of.
Okay. The victim of.
Okay.
So what's a seclusion? That's just go off
Isolation.
to another room?
Well, there's a legal definition of what a restraint and what a seclusion is. A seclusion is when you do not allow a student to, let me give you an example of what a seclusion is. Say you're getting a little bit out of control and we need to seclude you. We can seclude you in this room. I can tell Gary to go to that door and do whatever he needs to do to prevent you from leaving. And I can tell Al to do the same thing to that door. Do whatever you need to do to prevent him from leaving. And we have secluded you in this room. That's the legal definition of a seclusion. Not allowing a person to leave freely wherever they are. That's a seclusion. Physical restraint is when you don't allow a student to freely move their arms and legs. That is a physical restraint.
So
Legal
seclusion is
definition.
not necessarily isolation.
It is not.
It's not
Mm-mm.
putting them someplace all by themselves.
Some of our incidents of seclusion are we're in a classroom and a student is creating an unsafe situation. It's safer to move the 24 students someplace else and to keep that student in the classroom.
Okay.
That is a seclusion if we do
I
not
see.
allow that student to freely leave that room. So some of the incidents are that, actually, where we empty a room and leave that student in the room until they're able to calm down.
Okay.
No,
Any other comments?
I
Oh,
do,
sorry, Mark.
and I apologize if I causing you to repeat, but as I look at the numbers, Prairie has a significantly larger proportion of incidents than some of the other elementary schools. Is that because of the population? Is that because there's more special needs kids there? Is it just an outlier?
Many of these seclusion and restraints, like for example, this past year, it really has boiled down to just a couple of students who have had them. And that kind of has been our pattern, although it really depends. I think the staff last year really did a nice job of doing whatever they could to keep hands off and to keep kids in safe environments, however they needed to do that. Where I think before we had I think there was a change in the kids as well. Some of them that had been secluded and restrained before didn't have incidences last year. We also had a student move out of the district.
I think Kurt and his staff have done a nice job of talking about events that escalate situations and events that can de-escalate situations. And how do you kind of work with those so that it doesn't escalate to the point where it needs to be. So that's been a continual dialogue.
I also think that we're just getting to know the kids a little bit better and what some of their triggers are. We're spending more time focusing on that. I think our behavior coach has helped us with that a little bit. In November, I'm going to go to a 4-day training to become a trainer of trauma-sensitive schools and trauma-informed care, because a lot of our students have had traumatic experiences. So bringing that knowledge back, I think, will help more. It's a work in progress.
Yep.
It really is. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, beginning of school year report.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Peggy. First of all, just to start off with, I think it's been really a positive start to the year. Steve and I have talked just about all the changes that have been implemented with boundaries, changes in busing schedules, construction in Woodland and Kew, all of those aspects. We've had some minor issues that we deal with every year, but overall I think it's been very, very positive as far as, and we've been very pleased with just how the school year has started from just a structural operational aspect. As you saw in Connie's report, you saw the changes that we have in staff. One new administrator with Katie Grundle adding to our staff over at Prairie, 3 administrative support staff members, 2 psychologists, 1 technology assistant, 28 new teaching staff or new people to us, 17 new classified members. We're still working on a few of our classified positions, and we still have a hearing and heart. Deaf and hard. Thank you, Kurt. I wasn't getting that word out. That we're still working to fill. I think Kurt is working on, as I shared with you in closed session, through CISA to fill that. One of the things that we start to track, obviously, is our enrollment and what is occurring there. Our 3rd Friday count is coming up this Friday. As of last week, we had 4,195 students in grades K4 through 12. On top of that, we have to add about 10 early childhood students. That tips us over just over 4,200 kids for the year. From a budget planning standpoint, that's about 27 students higher than what we put in for our budget planning. And Steve and I have had those conversations with you during the budget process. We're usually conservative, but we were a little bit more aggressive this past year. I think we had 60, 70 kids that we put in there for the budget purposes, and we're 27 above that. So that's all worked out positively. We'll know our final FTE count once we have the third Friday count on September 16th. That'll account for our full-time students, and it'll account for any open enrollment in and out. First weeks of school, I think, were very positive. It was fun getting around to see all the different activities our staff are involved with. Just, I'm not going to even touch on all of them, but we had things from PLC development to literacy work, formative assessments, very specific work that was driven by either a department or a school was working on things. It was very impressive to see all the different aspects that our staff were working on, the depth of their conversations, and the engagement around the district on those days. Very, very productive. It also was fun to be out into the schools, particularly into the new intermediate school, into Heritage, and see the faces of kids and families as they were able to experience some of our new learning spaces. That was pretty fun. Gary and I got to watch the kids as they came into the intermediate school for the first time. That was a pretty cool piece. And then seeing reactions over at Heritage as that place has really been transformed in many ways. So all of those pieces are very much appreciated by our community to support those. I guess the only thing that I would note is that we have had a few just technology glitches with making sure we have projector, smart boards, some of those pieces in place. Those were, I think they're getting ironed out and should be fully functional this week, but that has been the one area that we've continued to work on. Findorf and all the other contractors have been great to work with. Any things that we're finding where something hasn't been operating as now that we're living in the space, they've been extremely responsive to being back on site and addressing those things. Our open houses are coming up here relatively soon with regards to our new locations. Heritage's open house is next Monday the 19th from 6 to 7:30. That's a self-guided tour throughout the building. We'll have administrators there, probably some staff will be helping out with just making sure that I can point out some of the changes that have taken place in that building. On Sunday, October 2nd, from 1 to 3, we will have an open house at the new intermediate school. That will have a short program beginning at 1 o'clock. Chris and I are meeting this week to talk through exactly what that will look like. The other piece I want to add is next Monday on the 19th at 7:15 a.m. we have another open house at the Innovation Center. The Innovation Center is moving along very nicely. It won't be completely complete by the 19th, but it certainly is a much different place than when we had our open house there last May. The windows are in, the walls are painted, really looking like a very different place. I know as I've talked to some kids as they were walking by, they didn't realize what was behind the wall, so that was kind of a mystery to them. So that's been fun to see. So please, if you're able to, come to that open house also early next Monday. Yeah.
Can you repeat when both those are?
Sure.
The Heritage one and the...
Heritage is next Monday, the 19th at 6 p.m.
Yep.
And then the intermediate school is Sunday, October 2nd at 1 o'clock. And then the Innovation Center is Monday the 19th at 7:15 a.m., right away in the morning.
I believe that each of us has in our mailboxes some additional information on the Innovation Center open house.
Yep.
Check your mailbox before you leave.
Thank you.
Yep. And then the last thing, I think our kickoff to the school year went very well. I appreciate Julie's comments as she welcomed back staff. I think that there was a very timely message about looking forward. I think that's a lot of the things that we're trying to put our focus towards. So thank you, Julie, for adding all of those pieces.
It was fun, my pleasure.
Yep. Overall, it's been a great start to the year.
Any comments or questions?
Okay, on to item number 4. There's information in board book that outlines the request from Kurt for an additional special ed teacher.
Yeah, in your packet, you will see a request from Kurt Ely with regards to the family moving in here in October that is precipitating our request for an additional staff person. That's part of what the data is that you have in front of you with regards to a comparison of 15-16 school year to 16-17 as far as number of students with IEPs particularly. You'll see the uptick there from 27 to 45 at Heritage. Some of those are accounted to some of our early childhood program moving over to Heritage, but it's certainly also an influx of our growth area in the district and the number of students with special needs that we are addressing. I think from Kurt's discussion with me on the item, it's a point where we would be most likely be looking at adding staff there without any new move-ins this next budget cycle. With the move-ins at this time, we are looking at, instead of hiring a paraeducator to help supplement some of the needs of the kids, hiring a certified teacher, also being able to take advantage then of some of the transfer service fund options that are available to us through the funding system. So
Okay.
I'll ask if there's any questions. Kurt's up to the microphone. He could answer them, and if there's anything with regards to funding, Steve can fill in on how some of those aspects work.
So if we can have, first of all, motion regarding the request, and then we can have discussion afterwards.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Julie. We'll give it to Julie this time. Are there any questions in addition to what was provided in your packet?
So basically, we're looking at about a $38,000 difference after we capture the transfer money. And based on we're 27 up on enrollment already, it really shouldn't be much of a problem. That 27 up on enrollment, are we expecting any FTE effect out of any of that? Usually it spreads out, so then it doesn't matter.
No. Yeah, I think we've addressed all that with all of our hiring and what our projections were. This is the one, but this really wasn't precipitated by the 27. It was precipitated by some of the specific needs of some students still to come here in October. So yes, I mean, that with the additional funds that would come from the additional students, that is one of the options for paying for the additional position. Okay.
So when you say coming in October, our third Friday count will not include, because the students, some of those are not going to be included in the number. But we know they're going to be. Okay.
Any family that, yeah.
Right.
The,
Okay, figured.
we'll still have the kids.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so the motion is on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank you.
Kurt.
Okay, I'm going to let Randy handle the
Yeah,
next couple of
what
items.
I've done in the agenda is just done a few things to try and rearrange and put some focus to some of why the different topics are coming forward. And we'll be continuing to work on this in future months as we come forward. But there's a number of items that would be on our agenda, and I've just put them under our strategic planning because I feel that they really line up with strategic initiatives that we have as part of our strategic framework. The first one we're going to talk about tonight is the employee health care clinic update. Al Yeager is here to help with that conversation. Stephen Connie will also be part of it. And then following that, I'm going to link items B and C together. One is the community engagement part 3, which we've already had some dialogue on over the summer. And then looking at how some of these things fit into some district goals discussions and looking for some direction as far as how we can kind of formulate our work over this year and some recommendations that I have. But to start off with, I think one of a key strategic area we have is recruitment, retention of staff. One of those pieces has been some work that one of our committees is working on with regards to the healthcare clinic. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve to kick off this part of the presentation.
Thank you, Randy. Tonight we're joined by Al Yeager. If you can remember, Al joined us in June a few months ago to provide a really high-level overview of the Affordable Care Act and really all of the changes that are coming over the next couple of years with healthcare. Al, Connie, and I worked together to put together this presentation on what we're considering the next phase of the partnership between our school district and Dean. Really the focus of this is a wellness or health clinic model that we would like to discuss with you tonight. I'm going to touch on the first couple of slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Al, and then Connie and I will add in some thoughts as well as we go through this presentation. But just to begin with, I'd like to start with kind of an overview of what we'd like to accomplish tonight. The first thing is I want to connect this discussion to really our district strategic planning. We want to share a timeline of the events with the partnership with Dean and really related to as well this topic with Employee Wellness Health Clinic. Why we are evolving with wellness benefits, what is the trend and why are we moving in this direction, how we are addressing the challenge, and really the how part is the part that we certainly want to call your attention to, because this is certainly very different than what we've been doing in the past. And then really a next steps and future timeline. We're not asking for any approvals tonight. What we're really asking for tonight is really your feedback and your opinion on this direction that we're looking to pursue. What questions you might have, what suggestions you might have, any concerns, comments. We're just really looking for a dialogue at the end from school board members to really get your thoughts as to where we're at in this process. We would like to be bringing this back to you in the next several months, seeking approval from the board, so your feedback tonight in this step in the process is really critical. The next slide really discusses district strategic planning. As Randy mentioned, this topic of an employee wellness or health care clinic directly connects with the district strategic plan. There's a section on human resources specifically calling out the health or wellness clinic model. We also have sections on recruitment and retention of staff. And so this topic and what we are discussing with you tonight is directly connected to a long-term district strategic goal in the area of human resources. And we'll connect back to that through the presentation tonight. We wanted just to make sure the connection between this topic and our strategic planning was evident. And I will turn it over to Al to continue walking us through the remainder of the slides, and then, as I mentioned, Connie and I will add some comments as we go as well.
Thank you. Good evening. The first slide that we're looking at, it just speaks to somewhat of the timeline and backdrop where things started with the Dean Health System. You'll see starting in pre-2002, there was a benefits committee formed, and as far as from a district standpoint, it included the board, admin, staff, representation. And the whole idea is to be part of any recommendations that he had a full 360 in terms of any recommendations. 2002 was the time period, not only the Dean partnership was actually part of the WEA plan. The WEA plan, you may or may not recall, featured the Dean Health System in their network, the point of service plan. And the whole idea there is by WEA focusing on the Dean Health System, they were able to get better discount pricing. They were able to, in the end, negotiate lower costs for the claims, which translated to lower premiums. 2007 was when the district started working with both Dean and Unity. What they realized at that point in time, from a district standpoint, was by going directly to the provider systems, and they ultimately provided themselves with better pricing than they did anyone else in the footprint surrounding Dane County, the 20 counties surrounding Madison area. And fast forward 2012, the education on clinic models started taking place with all the Dane County districts and frankly throughout the entire CISA too. And the whole clinic model concept is something that as an organization we've been doing throughout the state since the year 2000, but it became much more prevalent in the local geography in terms of what are the different models, how does it work? And as you'll see in 2013, Waunakee, in this room, we had many of the area districts participating directly with the respective clinic models that are out there, including, in addition to the UW system, in addition to the Dean system, some independent clinic models as well. And the whole idea was just to learn how do these different models work, how might they integrate in your current program. Come 2014, the committee, the benefits committee, recommended a consolidation to the Dean Health system, which included caps of 5% through July of 2015 through July of 2016. Meanwhile, fast forward, the committee approved extension this past year in 2015 of an extension of the 5% cap for another year, largely because of some of the missed deadlines in the process. Other items that were going on in 2015 included the nurse liaison, which we had touched on in the last meeting, how Jesse specifically has been active within the different district buildings and facilities, getting to know the staff and starting to integrate the wellness. And the other individual, specifically Tyler of the Dean Health System, has also been visible and active with the initiatives surrounding wellness. And again, we touched on that in greater detail last time. Lastly, in this past month, the handbook changed. There was a handbook change to incent Dean biometrics and health assessments. A large part of that whole idea is we're not trying to disrupt the primary care model that exists today. We're trying to catch care at an earlier stage so that there can, healthcare in general has been recognized as a broken model, the delivery model, and I would say a large part of what the Affordable Care Act is trying to address is just that, by getting wellness an earlier part of the culture within communities. Meanwhile, some of the other items that were promoted throughout in this past July include e-visits, electronic visits. We're seeing more and more of that. I know we touched on that in June as well, but it just reinforces that not only are we changing as we listen to the education throughout in the community, but healthcare delivery models are changing as well as far as being electronic, et cetera. So things are evolving more and more quickly. Some of the components as we look back in time, that just to reinforce, status quo just isn't an option from the standpoint that medical trend is just not sustainable. And other than if you charged, overinflated the premium and said, oh, look, our rates are flat, the reality is the infrastructure rates for the same claims at the same providers each and every year increase in what drives your premium, your claims. And that's just the message, that we continue to monitor the details underneath all the claims. There's more to this slide, but I'm not seeing it.
That's one of our famous board book conversions. Just disappears.
I like it. I can speak to what's supposed to be on here. It basically speaks to, in 2020, the Affordable Care Act has a component that has been, it was postponed, the Cadillac tax was postponed in 2020. And you certainly need to keep an eye on what is the threshold, why is there a threshold, and ultimately what the IRS is saying is that health care, health insurance specifically, but health care is the one benefit that never gets taxed. You know, you have deferred compensation or some type of TSAs that delay the taxation, but health insurance never gets taxed. And the IRS is saying, we want a piece of that action, so we're going to limit the amount that you can ultimately get away with. And that's how they created the Cadillac tax. And the mindset had always been, when they first heard of the Cadillac tax, was, well, that just means your plan's really rich. Not really. It just means they're putting a threshold on how much they allow you to get away with from pre-tax. This chart just breaks down how that Cadillac tax is determined and how it's scrutinized and what the thresholds are. And you'll see employee, employee spouse, employee children, and full family. And the thresholds right now that had been laid out there, always subject to change, but the thresholds that are out there are truly on the single and the family. Now, I've seen we've vetted all the different models. I mean, we could blend the two together and give you a lower family, but the reality is, what are we then doing to the single rate, right? So, okay, we lowered the family rate, now we made a bigger issue in the single. And The other reality is, as a school district, you have somewhere over 75% of your population are family enrolled. So there's a lot of dynamics that are taking place when we're looking at the Cadillac. We just know we need to stay under the threshold in terms of the amount that's pre-tax. The two plans we look at, both the HMO plan and the point of service plan, which we do give staff the choice. The bigger issue comes into play with the point of service because it's more expensive. Some of the other dynamics in terms of the engagement with the Dean Health System, the most recent commitment that the district made, you now have the 5% caps. The bottom line is, if you were to be on a fee-for-service type plan or something that isn't through the Dean Health System exclusively, the claim volume that you have would demonstrate a 22% calculation. So in other words, increase in 22%. We were able to keep it at the 5% with the commitments. One of the reasons for some of the handbook changes just speaks to the cap. In July of 2017, your cap is 5% as long as we get 85% or greater participation with the staff and 25% or greater with the spouses on biometrics. And while that is contractually a big motivator, I would say it is more than anything a tremendous opportunity to just initiate the whole wellness concept. The whole wellness concept, again, being creating awareness of every individual's health dynamics, knowing what your blood pressure is, knowing if you're a diabetic or not, knowing your benchmarks in terms of your medical situation, and then tying those by having a wellness clinic in the center of this and getting this data earlier on, whether it's patient education, health promotion, disease management for the chronic conditions, communicating with your local medical providers and having an interaction and just frankly being something pretty special in terms of what you would be able to provide or we would be able to provide as a district would really make it an exceptional situation by just having that much more education. And prescription drugs, I touched on this in June, it's really worthy of reinforcing, is a tremendous area of opportunity, not just from a cost standpoint, but from a compliance standpoint. So many chronic conditions are exponentially worse than they need to be because of lack of compliance. People can't afford or don't want to pay the additional copay for the cost of the prescription drugs, and as a result, their medical condition escalates much faster than had they been compliant. By having a wellness clinic that would potentially have some additional investment in the prescriptions to eliminate the barriers of compliance truly has proven over the last 10 years to make a difference not only in the individual's health, but the overall cost of the health program.
Dale, I noticed that Mark had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
That's okay. I guess my question was in terms of the participation with your spouse's independence, that's effective for the rates on July 1, 2017?
So staff members that are enrolled in the insurance, the employee and their spouse have to participate in the screening this year, and that will affect the premium contribution for next year.
Okay, and so that will be in the spring of the year, I assume, or?
Yeah, the assessment that when we bring people into the district to run the screenings,
Yep.
that will be in the spring, but we also included language that said employees can also go to their own doctor, get the biometric data and submit it in the way we need that to be done. So they do it at their own doctor or they do it on site with the people
Great.
that we bring.
Okay, good.
Connie was diligent to have a pretty broad window in terms of obtaining that information too, so it's not just a small window. The information in terms of the Sheboygan Area School District just speaks to an example of, I'd say, 25 districts throughout the state that have various examples like this. But the path that you're seeing yourself being in the middle of is very similar to what you see other districts where initially you have voluntary participation in health assessments and you start seeing various programs that are kicking off with the wellness development in terms of whether it's the Biggest Loser contest or Commit to be Fit, et cetera. Just informational meetings. Meanwhile, start implementing a contribution differential to obtain participation in the biometrics or the health status, and start getting something that's truly substantive. Meanwhile, continuing to expand plan design that creates commitment to wellness as well as participating in a clinic model, and what Sheboygan continued to evolve to. Truly, the wellness committee started taking ownership at a really interesting level in terms of the commitment to making sure there's a higher and higher level of participation. So I would look at you having your benefits committee being one thing, but the wellness committee, what you'll often find is it's a different energy, it's a different group, and it's a different opportunity, I would say, and that is what you saw in Sheboygan, where they really started increasing the incentives and recommending higher incentives for well-being. Summary points in terms of savings and trend. In addition to having very low increases, no caps or anything, the district is self-funded in this geography. It just makes sense for that in that geography to do so. But the other pieces in health assessment, what they started recognizing is every point of improvement, you start establishing points in terms of the health status. Every point of improvement, on average, throughout the staff, there's an estimated 1.8% claim savings. So health status truly makes an impact on the amount of claims that are taking place. And we also see additional savings from the staff and the overall plan savings over the years by having the clinic model, which we can speak to a little bit further. In terms of how the district, Waunakee Community School District's addressing the challenge, you see the Wellness Committee with both Amy Frank and Shad Fanta. You see participation levels really starting to ramp up relative to what we've seen in the past. You're seeing a wellness newsletter, campaigns, local prize sponsors, health recipes. Jessie, the clinic nurse, starting to see a lot more activity in terms of behavior questions, disease management questions, and certainly promoting the whole e-visit concept. And I mentioned earlier the handbook change that Mark, you had asked about, was another item in terms of addressing the challenge. And finalizing the clinic model. As it stands, looking at 8 different off-site locations for potential rental, confirming the best hours of operation, the objective low or no cost for services to the staff. So in other words, by having a fixed cost service available, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, staff would have an option for urgent care type items that would be low or no cost and very convenient. The objective would be looking at a trial from January 2017 through June of 2018, trying to establish what would the fixed budget be for that 18-month program, anywhere from 18 to 19 grand a month, whether it's 12 grand a month for the professional services, and then you have an additional, call it 1,800, 1,850 for admin, supplies, etc. You'll see a list of items that are frequently targeted for some of the services, whether going down the minor illnesses, minor injuries, physicals would be somewhat limited, some additional pharmacy services, vaccinations, injections. The question that is often asked when looking at this is underneath, for example, upper respiratory infections or a couple of others where it says no SOB. That's shortness of breath, just so you understand what's being asked. Next steps and future timeline. Confirm wellness clinic objectives. What the objectives would be: district offerings, provide a proactive way of offering more for less. As we know, medical trend is just something that continues to be battled. This is an opportunity to not only have fewer claims and potentially pay less for claims, is the whole idea. Integrating the entire wellness population management is just truly something that is a targeted focus of not only this clinic model but the Affordable Care Act. It's a cultural change. it's an attitude change. And whether it's consumerism or behavior ownership, it would be an exclusive option for the district staff and family. And speaking of competitive advantages from a recruitment standpoint, this truly has demonstrated as much in the Milwaukee area districts that we work with that have plugged it in. They really promote it as an opportunity, that they see it as a tremendous opportunity. And in this geography, it would be the first of its kind in this geography as well. And as lastly, the physician oversight integrates local clinic, which truly would demonstrate a local clinic partnership and collaboration at all levels from a delivery model. So next steps, future timeline. By the end of the month, have a complete finalization of the lease options. Dean, which is to finalize the outline of the wellness clinic proposal, hours of operation, staff model, setup cost, operating cost confirmation. And the objective would be a November board approval of any type of a site proposal, wellness proposal. The launch date, January 2017, and the thought process then would be March 2018 reassessment of the clinic design, the effectiveness in the future. Just revisiting how effective it was, and any other review to determine how better to integrate.
Al, can I just add a couple quick comments? We were originally planning to try to bring something forward for the start of the school year, but Connie and Al and I realized that the connection with the Dean Clinic here in Waunakee wasn't as strong as we wanted it to be. So we took a detour this summer, slowed the process down, and had several meetings with Dr. Ranum from the Waunakee Clinic over a several-month period of time to re-engage the local Dean Clinic. Much of our dialogue had been with Dean management, not located in Waunakee. So we took some time to slow the process down, which turned out to be quite valuable. As part of the dialogue, we are going to have a doctor from the local Waunakee Clinic provide physician oversight to this clinic, which has been a real positive that we didn't specifically mention, but there has been a little bit of slowing down the process because we wanted it to be as best as we put together as best as we could before we brought this together for final approval. And if you want to go all the way back to January, when we put together a budget planning framework, we had a special board meeting in January to discuss where we were going, big picture financially. This topic was on there, and this topic was on there as a possible use of the district's fund balance funds. And the reason for that is really the timing of a model like this connected to our health insurance renewals. As an example, Al mentioned we have a rate cap in place for July 1st, 2017. We do not have a cap in place for July 1st of 2018. Having this model up and running would require an investment on the front end so that we would be able to include this in our negotiation process for our health care contract beyond that point in time. It would require an initial investment, which is why we are calling it a trial period. We do believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this will be successful. It's been successful in many other regions of the state, but it would require that investment. So going all the way back to January, you may want to reference that document at some point, because we were looking at funding this model for that 18th month window through the district fund balance. And one other quick piece on the how, I think it's really critical to mention that this is just truly a value add for staff. No one is required to go to the wellness clinic. If you are comfortable and would prefer to go to urgent care, you can go to urgent care. It is just an additional service for staff that is being offered that, as Al mentioned, is exclusive, greatly reduced waiting times, someone that's just dedicated to the staff and families of the school system. We think it will become a very popular place for staff to go for their medical needs, but it's important to keep in mind it is truly optional. This clinic would have both short-term and long-term benefits. The short-term benefits is someone who wants to go and have something. Al had the list on the screen of the items that could be looked at in the short term, but the long-term benefits are even more significant. As Al mentioned, having a wellness professional to look at someone who might have the diagnosis of diabetes, to continue to check in with them, make sure that they're being compliant, or go through the steps with someone through our biometric screening that's been diagnosed as pre-diabetic, to continually work with that individual to help them for their own health and wellness to make sure they don't end up becoming diabetic. So there's a lot of short-term pieces to this and a lot of long-term pieces to this. But in the end, this really directly connects to that strategic planning process for the district when you go all the way back to really the discussion on employee retention, recruitment, things, health, well-being, and we would be in the position to have the first model of this type in Dane County, and if we do get that up and running, that is certainly something we'd be very proud of and would certainly be a strong value to the staff working for our school district and their families. So, Connie, do you have anything else to add, or do you want to open it up to questions?
I'll just make a couple more comments and then take questions. In the past couple of years, as Randy, Steve, and I have gone out into the buildings and talked to staff members about budget toward the end of the school year, this topic has often come up, and staff members seem very excited about it. Also, you'll probably remember last April when we had that strategic planning meeting with the board and the district leadership team, one of the sectionals that people could attend was around human resources and health and wellness, and a lot of interest, excitement, and positive comments about this. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Why an off-site location versus on-site?
Great question. They had that one.
The Steve line.
That's a great question. We originally wanted to focus in on the intermediate complex that was vacated from students to try to find the perfect location within that complex. Unfortunately, we ran into a number of issues that the initial costs to construct a space properly and have ADA accessibility would have been cost prohibitive. There were some really nice locations in that complex we wanted to take a look at, but they just didn't have the accessibility that we needed for folks to be able to get in and out of that location. But we started looking internally in the school district, and in the long run, if the trial proves to be successful, this is certainly something that may want to be brought back into a school facility at some point in time. We may want to make the investment at one of our school facilities or a location to do this. So we started moving down that path, but we're concerned that the initial investment might run $300,000-$400,000, which in and of itself could cost as much as the trial of running this. So we just quickly moved away from that type of an investment towards looking for more of a rental type situation to just be able to try to prove that the model can work.
Wouldn't we have to bring that up to ADA compliant if we start putting students in there anyways? So would it be a good investment or a positive investment?
It could be. A couple of the areas we were looking at, as an example, were the old staff break room, which you actually had to go down the stairs at the intermediate school to get there. So as of right now, that area is not accessible. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the planned use of that is right now and whether students would be down there or not. But we knew for the clinic to be down there, the investment was going to be pretty significant. And the second area was the old band space. which would have had some pretty significant investments in order to get it to where it would need to be. We did like that space as a long-term possible solution for a clinic, but again, the investment, and what we were trying to look at was to put the board in a position that we weren't going to ask for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 with this concept. We really wanted to ask for a much lower dollar amount to try to prove the concept out. But where our heads were at initially was, let's do it on site. But as we realized the cost to get a space to where we needed it to be was more of a longer term investment, our thinking shifted towards, let's prove this model can work first, and then we could find its long-term home.
It also added a couple of things. I think what we looked at was not only a space, but it had to have accessibility from the outside, and it had to have bathrooms. So those were some of the pieces that we needed to have within the close proximity. So that's really what narrowed us down to the places that we were looking at. But as Steve said, it just didn't seem, as we kind of programmed through that was the most conducive option for us. But in the future, there may be other options that we don't have at our disposal right now that could allow us, if this program proves positive, like we think it will, to bring it back.
Can I just make a possible suggestion? Playing around with having to move people all over the place since I'm working at Epic, they can't make up their mind from one month to another. They're happy to spend millions moving constantly. But the one thing that often hits me on stuff like this is, I guess I would still, when I'm looking at this, if we're going to be in November looking at different options of where to put this, I would like to see one option that keeps it in-house. Only because by the time you look at a 3-year possible short-term, by the time you consider all the rent you spent in that 3 years and everything you did to move people there and back, quite often that $200,000 looks pretty small. And so I guess I would encourage you to still, while you may think it's too expensive, still put that option on the table, just because it may be significantly saving a lot of money at the end of that 3 years if you did it in the first place anyway. I guess I just hate spending 3 years worth of rent and then still having to do the physical change.
I would agree with that. Putting an option for in-house, because I think you're absolutely right. Moving people, there's moving costs. There's a lot of things that you don't really see. Where if you just did it the first time, if you truly think that this is going to be successful, then I would do it right the first time.
Thank you for the feedback. We will definitely add that to the mix for when we bring it back.
Well, the spaces you considered all involve stairs, but a place like the old intermediate office wouldn't involve stairs, and there is close proximity.
Early on, we thought about that as a possibility, but as we talked to Dan and how Heritage is growing, that was one of the first spaces that they were moving into, which would make it not available for long-term use for the wellness clinic for staff.
Okay.
But it's set up with the bathrooms and outside access and everything, so at first glance seemed ideal.
But why let that wag the dog? In other words, if that's the ultimate, if that is a workable good space for that, then...
We also, as we looked at that further, thought about really wanting to have separation between students and the daily operations in the school and this clinic.
That part makes sense.
Yeah, so we were trying to keep that buffer for privacy. Also, with the whole badge system and security, we need to have things locked down, so some spouse might come in, nobody knows who they are, they're using the clinic, but then we can't have them wandering around in the building without signing in as a visitor. So a lot of those things we started to talk through that will just be some wrinkles we'll have to work through.
Those will be some of the things that we can bring back as we show the option for the in-house piece, because we'll have to add a few of those componentries into the proposal.
When you're doing this clinic, when is the visitation of people to this, or when would this be, all day? Is it after school, is it evenings?
So we're still trying to identify what the hours will be. We definitely want to have availability outside of the school day.
So I brought this up, just as you're looking at this, I don't know what you call it anymore, but where the old admin building, the downstairs where we created this room that's got all the stuff that we
There you
need.
go.
It would be separate from school
Yep.
that they couldn't see it. I would think that would be an ideal spot. It has a use for students during the day for, what was it, to teach them to be in an apartment or whatever that is?
Yeah, that's where our transitions program is right now.
Right.
Correct. So but we also want to have hours during the day. So
Yeah.
you want to have hours during the day and after school hours as well, so you can bridge that. And there's programming in there with kids in the lower level of that facility all day long.
Okay.
Other questions?
Great location, by the way. That would be a great population-wise.
We're gonna move stuff with other stuff. You can move stuff there too, and I don't know, just look at it.
Yeah.
We can. But we'll take from the feedback you just gave us, is we'll kind of take a re-review of kind of all of our different pieces. And I think that's really good feedback for us to kind of vet out as one of our options to show you.
And if you think of other questions along the way as you're mulling this over, feel free to contact me or Steve, and we'll do what we can to get the answers for you.
There were some comments about there is like a well-being support committee being facilitated, and local, teachers who are also involved, and things going on right now within the building, so that's happening.
It is.
Okay.
It's a great committee. They're working hard. They're looking at putting together some really great options for staff members this year. And that is one committee separate from the benefits committee that Al referred to as, we call it the insurance committee. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Randy?
Now I'm just going to continue on, and like I said, I'm going to take items B and C together, and I'm actually going to jump in just a little bit back. I'm going to jump back into what we just talked about, because I think it's a good example of where I'd like us to head in some of our discussions at the board level. As Steve pointed out in the beginning, the wellness clinic is certainly a big part of one of our initiatives with our strategic plan. It's one of our strategies. But there's two things that I took away from our discussion here. One was the input you provided in looking at other options. And that's one of the things, as we bring better topics in front of you that we're working on very concertedly, it gives you an opportunity to provide some of that input that we can then utilize as we bring things back. The second piece, and you just alluded to it, Peggy, was realizing we have a wellness committee as well. That just got started here in the last year or so. That'll be another topic that'll come back over time, and you'll learn more about some of the pieces that are kind of tied into those initiatives. And that's really when I take a look at the work that we're doing with strategic planning, the work we're doing with how we look at board evaluation, we look at my evaluation, et cetera. It all dovetails together around really the meat of the work that we're trying to do as a district. How is that progressing? And then how can we work together to really kind of forward those in a way that's beneficial to everybody in the district? And the best way for us to do that is make sure that we are talking and dealing about the right things. And that's really what the strategic plan is about. So you've seen, obviously, where'd it go? We started off last spring with this type of diagram, which was just our framework for our strategic plan. During the first day of school, I handed out, Jack, if I can just have you pass one of those down. This is just a slightly revised one from what you saw on the first day of school. Really looking at how does your strategic plans, can it get presented really to the community? So from my perspective, the first iteration is something that's helpful to me. It's really like something that helps me as a management tool, as superintendent. I think this is taking the same type of information and using it for a different audience. You're writing it for an audience that can be more consumable, can see some of the main points that we're doing as a district. It can hit our mission, vision, visionary directions. It's definitely a piece, Rebecca and I were just talking today, it needs to go up on our website and get that piece forwarded out there. And then there was the piece I added to you in board book, which we titled, can I say the back up one, Rebecca? If you just go to this document here, please, goals document. And it really gets, this is just a whole nother way of restating what this is and what this is, but it's putting it in an audience of really the work that we do around this table and trying to show that what we're trying to do is put strategic initiatives to strategies that promote, and then you can walk through each one of the different components of our strategic plan. And those really, the bullet points, if you can scroll down, please. Thanks. Each of these bullet points just shows different items that we can be talking about around this table to help give you an idea of, first of all, information. So if you look at, where was the one we just did? Implementation of the wellness clinic for staff and their families. That's really one of the updates that we're working on right now. You saw an update on what was occurring. You're able to provide input that's going to steer us as we move forward. Over time, as Al was sharing with you, some of the things that we're going to be able to bring back is how successful was it? What are some of the metrics that are coming back as far as usage eventually? And one of the things that we didn't tie it into initially in our discussion, how does that impact budget over time? How does that impact services to staff? So I think just that simple bullet point tonight can illustrate kind of an example of what I envision us kind of changing some of the work around this table to just be more directed every month towards strategic planning initiatives that can then be articulated on when is the right time for them to come. So earlier on tonight we talked about enrollment. When we look at the third Friday count, and once Steve has had a chance to really go through and analyze that, that gives us really the information we need to now have our annual report on how are we doing with student growth, what does that look like for school capacities, how does that relay into what's happening with our facility plans, and what are our needs as far as having to address those. So that's another one of our bullet points that comes up here. We have some things that that Tim was talking about, some of the items with assessment. Obviously, those are pieces that we need to be bringing back on an annual basis. But as we start to really draw the picture of what are the things that are of most importance that we're working on, it's going to give us the information to really have a stronger understanding of what's happening around the district. It's going to provide you with different metrics as far as how are we progressing in those areas. Some of them are going to be very much at the beginning stages. Some of them are going to be more sophisticated because we already have data on them, such as building capacities, etc. Some of them will be emerging, like the wellness clinic. But I think that over time will then allow you, as we're having conversations around the table, and you're looking at the board's eval and looking at my eval particularly, you start to look at the body of work that we're doing, and we can start to make some decisions. Are we moving in the right direction? So that's kind of the big overview, I guess, of kind of what I'm trying to frame up for us tonight. And if, Rebecca, I can just have you go back to the engagement one you had up there. Apologize for jumping you around here. Thank you. One of the things that we started talking about over the summer was different types of engagement with our community. Basically, how do we engage with them? How are we going to be having conversations? How do we partner with them? And a few of the things that I gleaned from the work that we did last time was we want to talk about things that are important to the public. We want to have room we have room for improvement with our communication and work with singles in the community, retired members of the community, and the business community. We have some key topics that we really feel like we can and should be talking about, such as AODA, student mental health, and co-curriculars. I think those are ones that particularly come around our table, and we are continually asking, are there some, what are trying to realize a good dialogue that we can have around those with our community. Those seem to be themes that are emerged. And we also have a desire to have open communications and open lines with our staff. If you go to the next item. So in essence, to do that, I think all of those things play in with our strategic plan as well, because they help us to gather information outside of just around the table and the information we're sharing, and help us to start to formulate and put some additional context to the work we do at our board meetings. Now, in order to do that, I've really recommended 3 different prongs to our engagement strategy. And there's more to this that would need to come kind of in another part of this, which would deal with things like if we were looking at social media or how we do some of our things with communication with parents or internal communications. But I just started off small with really 3 things that I think as a board administration that we can be doing. One is we often have a curriculum presentation at every one of our school board meetings. And if we're going to be spending more of our time kind of diving into larger topics like the wellness clinic and those type of strategic planning initiatives, one of the questions that I posed to Tim Schell was, what's the role of some of the curriculum presentations? Because those really don't necessarily fall within our strategic parameters. They fall more in good information for us to know, to give us a broad range of information around the district, which I think is important too. So what I'm recommending here is that we remove that from our regular board agenda, but that we create a different venue for those discussions to take place. And what I'm proposing is we take 2 special meetings a year, one in the spring and the fall, for example, and we invite in 3 or 4 departments on the same cycle that we currently have. And we would have a meeting where they could be, if you think about what we did with our strategic plan around the roundtable discussions in the Commons at the high school a year ago, we could have each department having their own roundtable, and we can rotate through. And we could have that to include our leadership team so that they can learn more about what's happening around the district as well, and also have an opportunity, if you wanted to invite any of our other stakeholder groups in, we could do that additionally. But it would give us a little bit more time with each of the departments that we choose to want to sit with, and it's a little bit more relaxed format than around a structured board meeting where we also have another full agenda. So that would be the full agenda for like a 2-hour meeting twice a year. The second piece is trying to look at some of these larger topics where I just think we need some greater dialogue, partnership, and feedback is around things like AODA and student mental health and their co-curriculars. So I recommend that we would look at holding at least one of these this year. I think a pertinent one this fall could be around AODA and student mental health. Potentially one with some of the work that Erin May is doing, we could do around co-curriculars in the spring if we choose to. And then the third piece ties into some discussions that we've had around this table with regards to, as we go into budget planning, what are the discussions as far as some of our priorities? Now, I believe that as we go through and have some more strategic discussions at the regular board meetings on some of these bullet points like I articulated before, one of the things that we will be talking about are budget implications or things we need to be looking at with regards to budget priorities. The second thing we can do though, and I think this would be very healthy for us as an organization, is this coming year is the annual, the governor's budget gets released sometime in January, I believe, or thereabouts. Following that submission, we can have a special meeting that includes administrative cabinet, the board, and our leadership team. It gives us an opportunity to present what are some of the projections for the budget. It gives us an opportunity to talk about what are some of the things that are on our mind with regards to budget priorities. And then it gives us an opportunity to have a broader dialogue with a larger group around what some of those pieces are, so that when we formulate our budget, we have an ability to communicate some of the pros and challenges that we have through that budget cycle, look at some of the priorities, and have some greater input. So when I take a look at our strategic planning and how it all kind of dovetails in with the board's work, and some of our work to see how are we progressing as a district, I think this helps us to build some context with regards to getting input from our different stakeholder groups. It allows us to have interaction with staff. It allows us to talk with our community about issues that we are continuing to have dialogues around. It allows us to put some focus on some of our budget planning with the larger group in an input circle. And then additionally, it allows us at our regular meetings to be strategic in our work so that what you are seeing is information and reports on the most important items that we are putting precedence to in the district. So that's a lot of information, and I've talked very fast here in just a few minutes. But I really would like to see some feedback, thoughts, ideas. This was really, I felt that in order to get started with the discussion, I needed to put something on paper that gave us guidance to respond to. Either you like it, you're not comfortable with it, or you have some ideas that you'd like to discuss and modify it. And I'm open to that discussion. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, turn it back over to you, Peggy, to wherever we'd like to go with that dialogue.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for kind of the reflection that you've obviously gone through to kind of pull together several conversations we've had in this area, as well as continuing to push forward the whole vision and strategic planning process, because the one thing is and putting something out there to respond to, because that's really the only way that you can facilitate the different expectations and manage the discussion with everybody around the table who comes with sometimes different viewpoints. But you've listened to us, and it's obviously reflected in this, and so thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I think it's, I mean, that's how you have to handle it.
The other
and
piece I want to add, Peggy,
yes.
Peggy and Julie have sat with me a couple times here over the summer, and including just a week ago, just as we've tried to dialogue a few of these pieces out. We talked about a few things at the HR committee, which kicked it back to really the three of us to have some dialogue around, and that's been very helpful to at least put some formulation to it. But now I'd like to see a broader response to see what your thoughts are.
The other thing that I just wanted to point out before then, because then I'd like to have Julie comment as well, is that this really aligns well with, I mean, kind of the process we're still going through. It aligns really well with some of the roles and responsibilities in the area of vision and planning process that the key work of school boards articulates. And so all I did is I made, and this is a copy of the page in our books that we've got that really talks to that. So I just want to make sure that everybody is kind of reminded of that, because this really is attempting to change the way we do a lot of things. I mean, we're going to be making a lot of change in the next year and a half or so, but it all is connected, and it's kind of actually coming together, even though it might sometimes feel like, oh, where are we going? Why are we talking about this right now? So I appreciate it. Julie?
A couple things. I'll just share my thoughts once again that when the committee assignment came out and I was placed as chair of the goals committee, my desire to move it more towards strategic planning kind of concept as was first initiated by Jack. I guess I see ultimately the goal to be, I would hope the board is an additional resource for Randy to help lead the district. Now it gets complicated because, like he said, unless somebody starts to write something down, we've got nothing to work from. So it's good if we're moving some of these items off our agenda and doing special meetings and those kinds of things. But I guess longer term, my question that I want help from all of the rest of you, and again, I don't see this as committee work. This is all of us. I don't think we should be meeting in committee. Is how do we make that bridge? How do we become people that are helping to lead and decide which the initiatives are, as opposed to being reported to on what things are going on and being launched? It's kind of a delicate balance. It's a bit of a mind shift, but I guess ultimately that's the direction I would like to see us head. And how do we translate these kinds of things to a better tool for our evaluation and for Randy's evaluation. I'm really frustrated because that's been supposedly, you know, one of the things I was charged to do in my role as goals committee person, was to come up with better instruments, for example, for our evaluation process. It seems like we keep kicking the can further down the road and we're not getting the things done. So, help. What are you all's thoughts on this process, what's coming down so far, and what next steps should be?
In reaction to what Randy's put
Yeah,
together, more
that.
important. Because I think, I mean, from Randy's perspective, this is something that he will find very helpful to use in communication with the staff. And that's really, I mean, he's the manager of the organization.
I think when you look at it is when you take a look at the one sheet that Rebecca had up on the strategic goals with all the bullet points, those are the things that we're working on. When you look at, if we're going to sit down and talk about what are the most important items that we are trying to move right now or initiate change in or develop, that's it. And those are the things that I think would be most helpful to bring to the board to be providing updates to, because those are the most pressing things that we are continuing to move forward with. And I think that those can be developed as far as what you want to see in those reports. That can be developed jointly. I mean, I was envisioning as I was thinking about this today, before a topic came up and we started to flush all that report out, part of it may be asking, what are some things that are of particular interest to the board with regards to that, so we can make sure we address that moving forward. I think the pieces that I've tried to outline here, that is the work we're doing. Those are the things that we have to start moving forward with, and we already have. It's a matter now of wanting to try to bring those pieces into the fold with the board so that you can see the breadth of the work that's occurring and see what are some of the outcomes, struggles, positives, negatives, etc. So that we can, I think, once you get through that cycle, you're going to be better informed to be able to understand why some of the budget priorities and other things take shape.
Mark, I saw your hand up.
I don't know if it's up, but I like the concept you proposed. Tim and I talked a little bit because he shared your concern about what about the curriculum reports, and I think that's an important piece that we don't want to let go of. So to have two early and a late the presentation, I think that'd be terrific, because I think those are still things as a board we do want to hear those things, but somehow you do need to create the time at our meetings to discuss what's really part of our initiatives. So and the way you've constructed things here, the linkage meeting, the cabinet meeting following the governor's response. I mean, I think that's something that we talked about last year. A lot of us felt almost impotent because, okay, here's this state thing be mandated to us, but we don't have time to talk about it and try to problem solve with our staff. And so that concept sounds very positive to me as well.
So any other thoughts on, say, like moving those curriculum? Okay, Dave.
The only thing I'm looking at is, right now we often have a time crunch in scheduling meetings, and we're now talking 2 new curriculum meetings, the AODA meeting, the co-curricular meeting, and then a meeting on the governor's budget. That's 5 new meetings a year that we're adding in. And then we still have our special meetings usually around the board structure, and then one about, the superintendent and stuff like that. We're talking now 7 special meetings a year. We're getting close to basically 2 regular meetings a month.
Yep. I think last year we had 27 or 28 board meetings. And
we had
full board? Or
not full board meetings.
Between board meetings and special meetings.
We had 27. How do we do that?
So now we're at
Well,
32.
if, when you remember.
Now we'll be up to 32 by adding
So,
5.
so this
Facilities.
is actually, what I think the goal would be, Dave, would be to try to be more purposeful in what
Yes,
those were.
good word.
Because I think what we talked about during our board eval was having 4 special meetings and having specific topics. And I just think that some of the work that, if we can structure it this way, I think we're gonna be able to accomplish more in less time and you be more informed. So I think that our hope is, but you're right, you throw in the annual meeting, the set the levy meeting, you have some of those just as a matter of course. But if you go back to last fall, when we meet 8 out of 10 Mondays, I think when I went back and counted, it was a pretty intense fall last year. And I think if we can look at, the one question I don't have in this model is, what does that mean for all the other committee meetings? Because some of these topics I see as full board pieces that necessarily don't need to be or should be vetted out at a committee meeting first. They should come here for the whole board to discuss, because that's the purpose of really having them as monitoring reports, is so the whole board can see them, react to them, give feedback. But there's obviously going to be other things that need to go to committee. I mean, we have facility type things that are going to need to have facility type eyes on them outside of this type of stuff. So there's still going to be a purpose for them, but that'll be a bit of a growing pain as far as what are some of the things that go to committee or not. But I would see these bullet pointed type items being really the direct links that we have at a regular board meeting, with the idea being that we can be more streamlined and more purposeful in our work when we come together at our regular meetings.
But somehow too, this has to translate into agreements that we are holding ourselves accountable to, that we will accomplish. So, I mean, these are all great and wonderful topics, but what's our measure, what's our evidence? So, and at what point do we decide that? Because to me, this is all front of the year stuff to do. It's like we need to make a commitment then to have at least one community engagement meeting. We need to make, I mean, whatever the items are.
See, what I would say, I guess from what I proposed here, Julie, the things that I had for community engagement, which were kind of actionable things, as far as that you're going to, that we'll commit to having those meetings around the curriculum topics, we'll commit to the meeting with the linkage meeting, and we'll commit to the meeting with our leadership team around budget. I think those are some things that are very actionable pieces to commit to. And I guess that's a question is, do you like that approach or do you want a different approach? As far as some of the items on the bullet pointed pieces, the hard part I have with that is choosing a couple of them to say what are our main goals, because these are all pieces that we're moving right now and they all need to be moving. And they're all being moved by different parts of the organization. But I think as you see them come through, you're going to see different metrics that are going to be part of each of those that will help to give you an understanding of where they're going. But is it going to be 1 or 2 of these bullet points? Because I can't just focus on 2 or 3 of them.
Got it.
I need to keep the rest of them moving because we're a broad organization that really covers a lot of ground, all the way from facilities to mental health to curriculum.
Gary, thoughts, reactions to? Or just kind of hard to wrap your
I
head around?
kind of get what you're doing. I see it, and hopefully it makes the meeting. Jack's talked about this as far as, him and I have had a couple of discussions as far as helping to grade what you do or know that when we do your assessment or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And hopefully, what I'm thinking of this right now is hopefully if we do this better, our other meetings from facilities to whatever get simpler. And then you have to trust them to just do their angle of it and then it comes back.
That's
I
right.
think that would
That's right.
help that. So facilities does a couple things that fits into the big strategic plan that we wanted to push this year. As an example, one thing, the things we're pushing with Warrior Stadium and stuff like that, which are big things that you don't do every time, we're saying now that's a push. So that fits into your plan there someplace, I would assume.
Yep, maybe that's.
And then
all
you just
part
let the
of it.
facilities handle a couple sides of that, and they report what it is, and it gets a little simpler versus.
That's a great example, Gary, because one of the things that would come forward at a board level would be a report on where we're at with facility maintenance planning. So that would be a report that would come forward that probably Steve and Joe Bellomo and I would be presenting. But one aspect of that is Warrior Stadium. Another aspect of it could be something that's specific to facility maintenance issue we're dealing with right now. And those are very appropriate things that then need to, as isolation items, need to be going from a management standpoint back through committee. But the larger report is going to cover all.
And for 4 years, it's really nothing, but when we're in a referendum year with funds according to whatever, then it's important, it's more in the front.
Correct.
And I could see some other things, I don't, some of this is hard for me to wrap around right now, but
Right.
I see it simplifying some of that hopefully, and then our committee stuff isn't quite as cumbersome as it is right now, where too many times I think everybody's trying to know everything about everything, and that's hard,
Right.
Okay.
right?
Yeah, the committee work should take some things off the
rest of it.
plate of the whole, as
Yeah.
opposed to just being another step in the process that makes the process longer.
Right.
I mean, what you
So-
just said, Gary, was perfect. I mean, like as Randy said, because without having a framework for thinking about like vision and the strategic areas of thinking, the concept of where do you put a Warrior Stadium, or if it didn't even have a spot in there, you question, is it worth our spending our time talking about?
You
That
can
really
take other
guides
things too,
everything.
that's the easy one for me to think of, but
Yep.
testing.
But
We've been
whatever.
talking about
It's,
testing.
another-
So that fits in your thing someplace, and we can make a board decision on where we want to start going with that stuff, and that gives you direction to do that, which then changes how the curriculum meetings are with
Exactly.
testing, because we're taking this approach at it.
That's right.
It's a
That's
framework
right.
for thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
The other example
And
I
maybe you're
had
not
is,
having to meet every week.
There you
Was-
go.
Mhm.
well, the other example I heard was from
Once a
listening
month.
sessions that you came back from the last couple of years. You've heard just about changes in student behavior and classroom management things. But one of the things that we have to be, that is one of our directions, is implementation of Tier 2 strategies for behavior and emotional needs. That's directly in response to that. But if that's a topic here, you're going to learn more about what are some of the issues, which is an informative piece on the front end, and you're going to be learning about what are some of the strategies we're doing to try to correct it. And you saw some of the data that Kurt brought through tonight with like the whole seclusion and restraint report. That's got some data and metrics to it. You start to see those pieces that we can build as we have some of these discussions at this level. So my thought is you grab 2 or 3 of these per meeting to try to be more pointed in those pieces, and that's the bulk of what our meeting becomes.
And so then what you're kind of asking for the metrics of your evaluation is, if we as a board choose to go this way, there's some angles with that, and then it's going to be, are you getting the stuff we want to get done?
That's correct.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
the ultimate
That's
goal.
correct.
Yeah.
And that's,
What I-
we have a way of
on
checking
its-
that.
Yeah.
On its most simplest form, you're going to be
See,
getting
that's how I talk,
reports.
yes.
You're going to be getting reports on each of these different 5 items, of which the bullet point pieces are evidence of what we're doing, or showing what we're doing, and it can be as simple as saying, are we moving in the right direction? But it's going to give you more information than what you currently have, because right now we don't have the venue for these most strategic items to come forward for you for discussion, dialogue, and information.
So then to your point on what you wanted to get rid of out of our meetings to move towards this, I agree with that. And do that as you need to get this going, but
And it puts an onus on us to make sure that our reports meet the needs of what we're reporting on. So they have to be informative, they have to have data pieces, they have to have ties back to our budget, so they need to be complete reports. So that's the onus on us.
So how do we decide at this point then, what are the 3 or 4 evidence points we are going to look to measure and hold accountability to ourselves and to you by the end of the year? How do we move that process along, that they're identified, voted on, agreed upon, and we've got some means to measure
I'm going
it.
to ask a question of clarification. Are you looking at kind of actionable items as far as, are we doing the linkage meeting? Are we moving some of kind of those things that I talked about under engagement and saying those are our actionable pieces that we're going to move forward to make sure that we do? Or are you looking at something from kind of the bullet pointed areas to say what's our priority? You know?
Gary?
See, and that's my read. They would need our 33rd meeting. But you take those 5 points and you take what you've got there, what's moving, and shake it in that now, and you analyze, and we decide where we want to go with that as a group. And then you figure that out. I don't think you have to, if that's the 5 moving areas you got going right now, we need to give you direction on what we think that's supposed to be and how you're going to move it forward.
Or react to what, because at some point, we're gonna have a budget that
And
will,
then you report back on how that is moving forward, and as it is, or whatever, right? Isn't that what you're doing?
And I think we're saying.
Or you either
We're saying
prioritize
the
too
same
on where
thing.
you want it, what's first, what's second, a little bit.
I had asked that question, but it's hard to do priorities.
Yeah, one of the things that I think came out of our discussion was we need to have something that's actionable. So my actionable pieces are a couple things. One are some of the engagement strategies. And that's the piece with the linkage meetings and making sure we are pulling together our larger collaborative meeting around the budget. It's making sure that we find a way to still interact with the staff departments on the curricular areas. So to me, those are definitely actionable items. The pieces that I have on this bullet pointed sheet is the ones that I see. These are all the things that are, the 1 through 5 is basically taking these items and really synthesizing it down. It's taking this chart and synthesizing it down into really stating, instead of it stating the teaching and learning objectives, it's talking about established strategies to continued academic growth. Under there comes 5, 6, 7 things that we are doing. It's everything from STEAM and the Innovation Center and Next Generation Science Standards. It's academic and career plans. It's things we're doing with literacy. It's things we're doing with our PLC culture. Those are all pieces that relay into moving things forward academically. And those are pieces that need to come forward to this body to make sure that you're understanding what's happening with PLC, what's happening with Innovation Center, Next Generation Science Standards. So we can have a discussion about what's occurring there and what are our plans moving forward. Now, the one piece, and I'm not sure if this is where you were going, Julie, but if we try to identify 2 or 3 bullet points that you want as the primary focus, from my perspective, I have to keep all of these moving forward.
Yeah.
Because they're not all one person deriving them. Some of these fall with Steve, some fall with Connie, some fall with me, some fall with Kurt, some fall with Tim, some fall within broader committees across our organization. They all have different representation of leadership of them, but they're the pieces that are moving the whole organization forward. So when we talk about identifying those 2 or 3 things, I guess I just need some help with understanding of how do we define those?
So ultimately, my goal is I don't want to suffer through what our evaluation process has been over the last, I don't know how many years, both with you and with us. I want that process for all of us to be more meaningful. The tool, I mean, it does come down somewhat to the tool that we use. It's so cumbersome, it's so long, people have become disengaged, they don't even always fill it out. And face it, the most valuable part is when we get comments on the comment section. But if we had agreed at the start of the year that there were 2 or 3 checkpoints and some
That's what
way
we're
to,
working on.
yeah.
Sure.
That's how, in fact, I don't know if you were at the board meeting where the HR committee came back with the recommendations on the change we were going to be making to the current tool and bringing back literally 3 different
let's say, priorities, because one thing I would argue is that, if you look at what Randy's currently doing, and he's invested a lot of his time in, is recommending a visionary strategic planning process to the board that incorporates participation by broad. That is very
That's the goal.
actionable.
That's actionable.
And that is,
That's right.
that's a big one. And I would argue that even though we didn't put that on a list of things for, accomplishment this year, that in the absence of making that a big deal,
So-
because, so that could be one.
Right.
Sometimes it just takes me a minute for it to click
I
in.
know.
so.
That's okay.
But I think what you're asking, Julie, is when you're looking at it from a board's eval perspective or my eval perspective,
Yep.
instead of trying to swallow the whole thing, you're trying to narrow in on 2 or 3 things that you can focus on.
I guess.
Is that what you're trying to say?
I think so.
So if that's, can you borrow your red sheet here?
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's like, I don't know what's, but if you're looking at trying to say, you know what, I really want to just, I want to focus in on this year on Randy's evaluation and the board evaluation on, we're going to pick 2 up here with the board and we're going to pick 4 with Randy. That those are areas that then we can focus on and I can report to you on. But I'm still going to want to report on this
Yeah.
because that's what's happening in the district.
Got it.
And what I just don't want to have happen is that the only things I'm reporting to the board on are
Got
these
it.
4.
Yep.
That's where I think we were missing
Yep.
each other.
Okay.
Was I wanted to make sure it was broad enough base to encompass the work we're doing, because I think that's important. But if you want to identify as the board which of these 2, that's fine. I mean, that works for me.
Jack?
I guess when I look at these, I don't really see them as goals because, they're statements, they're tactics.
They are.
We want to, implement, or we want to establish a culture, PLC culture across the district. That's a, 5 to 10 year goal. That is not something we can hold you accountable from the standpoint of, okay, we're sending more people to more classes, we're doing more training, we're, doing that kind of stuff. But, how do we define, culture? I just don't see a lot of, implement some internal financial controls. I'm assuming
What
we
does
got
that
those
mean?
already. We're just improving on what we've got. I like the structure, as far as, these are the things that are going on in the district. But, what we tend not to do is put dates on it, saying, we're gonna have this strategy developed in 2 months.
The action plan under each of these bullets.
The action plans.
And what I would argue to that, Jack, is that that's what I would intend to see when those come to you. So when we have the action plan on PBS, the PBIS alignment to complement student behavior. I mean, that's a behavior piece. Those are some things that we have actions going on right now. And there's going to be data pieces that we can bring with those. So I see all of those having, each of the bullet points as they come forward should have where are we at in the process and what are the next steps and what are some of the timelines. So I think what you're getting at is what you will see through some of the report pieces that I have to be managing on my end. And that's the part that then can be transformed moving forward. But one of the challenges that I had trying to narrow it down just kind of 5 broad areas is it's bigger than 5 goals. I mean, unless and that's been something I've always been challenged with, is saying to write a goal at a district level that says we're going to increase reading achievement by 5% by the end of the year. Well, to me, that's not a helpful goal to help move us forward, because reading achievement is in all different places in different buildings. Some buildings, it's not the place they should be putting their efforts. In others, it is, but it's not where I think our district pieces should be focusing. I think our district pieces need to be focusing on the key works that are occurring, and then we have the metrics that we follow throughout. And part of that is hard to articulate tonight because we haven't really had the venue where we've shared this type of things. Some of it's come through committees, depending on what committee you sit on. And you've seen those things and you've seen them come back over time, but unless that came as a formal report back to the board, it wasn't something everybody saw. And I think that, to go to Julie's point, some of these pieces coming to the full board is going to provide a greater breadth of what's occurring. And I think we can hit some of those metrics and answer some of those questions for you. Like I said earlier, some of them are just emerging, so we have to figure out what that metric is. Some of them, it's more sophisticated, and we already have some of that.
Gary's been itching to say something.
You're talking about like the PLC stuff, and Joan talked about tonight, it's great, this and that. I'll guarantee you I'll probably never go to the thing to see that or whatever. But that doesn't mean that we haven't, as a board, took a good emphasis and put a lot of money towards that. So to see how that's integrating and how that's helping or not, that we aren't just flushing that away would be important for me to see. And that actually doesn't take a meeting. That can be a report from you when you're doing your analysis of how that's fitting in and that it's really doing something. And instead of us having a 2-hour meeting, you can flip out a 2-page report that you're probably doing anyhow, how it's integrating, where we're short, where we're not, if they're using it. Same thing with the PBIS. If we start, as a board, we take a general look and we say, what are we doing at each school for behavior and performance or whatever, for behavior issues, and how is that going? Because we kept hearing that at the listening sessions.
Right. So
So then it fits in, and I don't know how you fit this in with what you're doing, but to me, then we can say, okay, you said you were doing this, where are we at the end of the year, and you got something you can look at.
And that's my point of wanting to bring it back here.
That's right.
Is so that you can hear that.
That's right.
Is that you can hear that report, you can hear where some of these pieces are, so that partially when you go to a listening session, you have better information to help you answer some of those questions. And two, I think it's a point where it's going to, over time, some of these aren't 1-year things. Some of them are a little shorter term, some of them are longer term, as Jack pointed out, and you're going to be able to see how it progresses over time. And some of the evidence is narrative in value. I mean, when I sat down with the principals and we talked about what were the things that help you move things forward, PLC pieces were prevalent in our discussions because certain things couldn't have moved without having that level of context. But I don't have a number to put to it.
Right.
I have a narrative that says, I know that our key piece that helped us move this was this. So you can tell those stories, and I think that's sometimes valuable to put a context to that as well. And I want to be able to provide that opportunity where Chris or Dean or whomever can come forward and share that.
In part to what Jack was speaking, maybe some of those bullets are more conducive to putting a target date on.
Yeah.
You know, for example, the PLC thing. I mean, how many years are we going to be sending people to the conference? Is that going to be in perpetuity, or by what date do we hope to have a culture
trained.
Embedded
Yes.
or trained? And,
Yes.
and again, recognizing that's not
Yeah.
a concrete, that's a movable date.
Sure.
But it gives us that, or the same thing with the health clinics. I think that's a tangible, concrete thing that helps me assess how well are you retaining and attracting staff through our benefits program.
Right.
And so to have a target on those that can have a target would help create some of the concreteness, I think.
Sure.
The strategic plan is the longer lens, but at
Yep.
some point, those should be fleshed out with more measurable, short-term goals that are all feeding into that longer lens.
Correct. And I think that's what, when I look at, can I get Richard that one? When I look at this piece, this becomes when I'm meeting with our administrators to talk about each of those different pieces, Julie, that's what needs to get fleshed out. Is what are the timelines? What are our strategies? What are who's responsible for them? What are some of the data pieces that we're gathering that are evidence of success? That's the stuff that needs to be fleshed out, and that's what I anticipate bringing forward here. But I'm cautious to create a place where now we have, because some of these action plans over time can be relatively detailed, that now that becomes the work here. I view that as really my work to be able to manage that. And what I need to bring to you is the reports of what's the progress update and how those are going, that I can share what Jack is hitting on, which is the timelines. And if there's the metric piece there, we can have that dialogue around that in a summary format. And over time, it should give you an idea of exactly where we're headed.
But you are managing the action plans, but we need to understand what those gates are in the action plan.
Correct.
So that we can say,
Right.
we're on plan or we're off plan.
Absolutely.
Why,
Absolutely.
why is that? And I don't
Absolutely.
think we want to manage the action plans.
Right. Right.
No, we're not.
Without
You
the
just
dates-
wanna-
Without the dates on, this is the time frame that we anticipate this to happen, this to happen, this to happen.
Correct.
Now we've got our check sheets, and we can say, okay, Randy, you said these people were gonna have this done at this time.
Right.
What,
What
help
happened,
us
right.
understand
Right.
why it didn't, or you're ahead of schedule. Because the biggest problem you have with the board is you get all this stuff going on, and we're saying, yeah, let's do more stuff, and then you're coming back to us and saying, God, everybody's stressed, because we're just piling more stuff on them. And, we have no idea that we are creating the stress and screwing up your culture.
That's the point.
No, that's a great point.
So the framework, though, should help us, but that should also allow flexibility so that then all the other stakeholders, all the way down the line, are doing their little pieces, creating their goals, but they understand how it fits into the longer strategic plan, as opposed to everybody just, well, this was our favorite goal of the year, and this was our favorite goal of the year, and, the pieces rarely connected, and it was like, what are we doing?
Those are all fair.
Well, and I would argue one thing that wouldn't have been on our radar a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, would be this whole concept of an innovation center. And all of a sudden, boom, somehow it's happened. I mean, so how does something like that fit into, at some point you could say, well, you know what, it doesn't fit into our goals and our long-range strategic plan. So either you're going to find a way to make that happen and make room for it by allocating resources in another way, or it's...
And I think
But
that's...
it's supported,
To me, I'm sorry, go ahead. But, Julie talked earlier about shared leadership. And to me, I don't want to be the light on the bow of the ship. I think that's your job.
Yes,
But because you came to us, Jack got involved, up to his hips in this thing. And it became a shared enterprise. And to me, that's where your leadership we can follow your leadership, but I don't want to be the one that's coming up with, we could use a fab lab in here. Because I don't know that we need a fab lab.
Right.
That's your job.
And the part that misses, when Tim and I were talking, we talked about Fab Lab 3 years ago.
Yep.
And it just happened that sometimes the timing piece comes together,
Right.
and that's where some of those aspects kind of gel. But those are the things I'm hoping that through this process, we get an opportunity to share more of those ideas so that they don't feel like they just come out of left field.
So the light bulb at the bow of the ship, that's kind of one extreme. I guess I just don't want to be relegated to the rubber stamp at the back of the boat either.
Nope.
So, how do you balance somewhere in between?
Well, we're doing a lot of that tonight with many of our discussions.
And I think with the strategic plan, we have a general map that, and not just, and a specific map. And what it does, it allows people who have had different experiences to respond to it and bring it to the enterprise.
And I love the fact that, at one point earlier in this meeting, there was not an attempt to include as one of the options in the clinic model something in-house. We said, well, we still want to see it. And that was input, that was valuable to the development of whatever that's going to become. And so that's part of it.
See, the Innovation Center thing's a whole different thing to me, but I think the board should have had an idea or saw something, or maybe administration brings it to the board and you say, okay, education's changing a little bit. We need to incorporate more trade stuff into our thing because we're giving that to education. That to me is, and so then maybe Randy brings it in, maybe Jack brings it in, maybe Joan does. I don't know who says we need to address trade school stuff more than just college. Well, then the Innovation Center, and I agree with all that, totally. So then that fits in there and gives us an avenue to do it. And then it's more, we're asking you, how do you do it, or what do you know?
Right.
And you go, but the school board says, we need to go more towards trades a little bit. We're too much college prep. We're leaving out an area that, as somebody seeing in their job, that there's a better need with. To me, that's where the board should be. We don't have to know everything to implement it, but then we need to say, okay, we want to implement this, how are we doing it? And then we got something we can grade you on and do on. That's, to me, what we should be talking about. And that's why I like the Innovation Center. I think it's a perfect fit for going that direction, which I didn't know how we were going to do it before, but that gives us an avenue to do that.
I do think all of our different lenses add value to the ultimate end product. It's just how do you channel that? And
But that's a strategic plan.
Yes.
And your that's to me, a future plan of your school is doing that, and then what facets make that part of it go. And then there's something else. Then there's facilities, and where do we want to go with that? And the board makes a big decision on what direction we want to do facilities now. And then you can get into curriculum and say some of that when we're sitting there saying what are our graduation requirements and all that stuff. We should have a bigger input on saying, we want this as a board and think this is important. And then the committee does some things with that and you do that. Or, I don't know, there's all kinds of big ones. And there, if I looked at your thing there, I could find 6 more.
yeah.
And my
But
guess
the
is
board
that-
should make the big decision on that, and then it's,
Yes.
how do you get there? Here's the things we need for that, and then we can say, are you meeting them, aren't you meeting them,
Yeah.
what are we doing?
And I think in terms of, individual input, I think every one of us has multiple meetings, one-on-one meetings with Randy each, I don't know how many times each year. Yeah, it's on various topics. We do that. It's always happened. We don't want to get in the way of that. You can set up a time and say, okay, wait, I'm going to pick your brain. I want to share, ask these types of questions. And that's how we don't want to change that process because it's happened and it's worked well. And so far you're saying that it's okay. It doesn't interfere. That's part of how we get to where we are. So, good.
I'm not sure we have to add 4 more board meetings, so I think what you do is you start incorporating this. If this is the vehicle to get information, they should be incorporated into, into our regular meetings. And I think as you develop this, your reports are going to be honed over time as well. So that, because we do a lot of listening in this board room for 4 hours a night, or 3 hours a night. And if you look at the board, we're here to make policy decisions, vote on things that need to be voted on.
You got what you need?
I got what I needed.
I don't want to screw up the culture.
You're welcome. What I've heard thus far, and tell me if I'm wrong.
And we did agree,
Yes.
actually, at 4 special board meetings, so maybe the question is, what should those 4 meetings in the year be?
I guess what I'm going to go back to is looking at the idea of the linkage meeting, the idea of the meeting around the budget, and the idea of around having 2 meetings, and that gets back to, I guess, what your point was, just Jack, and I guess I'd look at your feedback on it. The 2 meetings that would kind of focus just on the cycle of those curriculum reports that traditionally come here and doing those in a different format. Do you like that plan, and are you comfortable with that kind of moving forward to be part of something that we commit to for the year? Because what I will do then is start to frame those out as far as when they can occur and bring back next month kind of that schedule of what that could look like.
Can I just say one thing, Randy? On the linkage meetings, the one on co-curricular, if we're expecting the public to come and be more involved, I would try to tie that as heavily to the Warrior Stadium community discussion. As that is going out there and they start talking to more people and start doing more fundraising, doing that meeting somehow tied around that will probably get more interest than anything else. And while we can talk about all over co-curriculars, what's gonna bring them into the room is the stadium. And that's always the hardest part about a linkage meeting, is getting people who aren't here into the room. So I would tie it together. I don't know, that's probably gonna be around, what, January, February timeframe?
That was kind of my
If I had to
thought.
guess.
Yeah, that's when they'll be kind of getting their dollars together, right?
And that's probably gonna be more publicly noticed by people than anything else.
And my thought was if we were gonna do something on co-curriculars, that's about the time frame it falls. Some of the AODA things, there's some activities going on this fall. I know Brian's doing a thing around homecoming. It probably falls somewhere as a follow-up to some of those type of things if we wanted to do that.
To me, if you're doing that too, and I agree with that, and you're doing linkage and getting people in there, then you do your long-range plan and re-emphasize that and where you are with that, with all your facilities, almost make it a, whatever, facilities thing, and that's a piece of it.
Whereas
But your buildings and where you're at, and you recap where that all is, because the next one will come at some point, sooner than you thought with the growth we have, and you.
Oh, no, that's why we have that new heritage school that can expand like crazy for a while.
Yep.
It's gonna absorb the next.
Till we put a
level.
clinic in it, there you are.
I think I have what I need. What I will do is I will put
Eat up
together.
the space.
What I'm going to start doing is looking at how we can start to incorporate some of these reports into our future board meetings. Start doing that as we progress into next month. The second piece is I'll put some timelines together with regards to what this may look like over the course of the year, so you have a sense of when some of these items may fall. And the feedback I received on some of the goals pieces is making sure we have some of the timelines for objectives so you can give context of where we are and how we're doing and how we're progressing, to Jack's point.
So do we need to like approve what you've set down as a framework for our strategic plan, or is that too premature?
I think it's fine for you to do that. And I mean, the bullet points pieces these were examples. There may be things that kind of emerge that will be added to that. But yeah, I think that the concept of what we're talking about and particularly the things that we're trying to commit to, those linkage meetings and those pieces, I think those are good to have action on if you're prepared to do so.
So does somebody want to offer a motion? I know we did on some of this, but this is kind of.
We approved that as a
We
framework.
approved this as a framework. And so when it comes to kind of the next reiteration of that is really what.
So if you're looking at what I was proposing, it was really the direction on the engagement strategies, the three different pieces there with the curriculum reports, the linkage meeting, and then the expanded meeting on the budget, and then structuring our work at the board level to be based off of reports tied to the strategic plan. That's kind of the concept.
So I move that we
Do all that.
embrace the format and the vision that you just said.
Embrace the format.
Yeah, I
second
mean,
that.
yeah, okay. But there's a motion and a second to kind of move forward with the things that Randy has talked about in terms of the strategic planning process. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. I am excited about this. This is kind of the fun part of my work, so thank you.
Building bridges.
Yeah, this is also tied in. I'm going to ask Kurt if you can just come forward for a second. Building Bridges is a program that we received some notification from Joe Parisi from the Dane County Exec's Office. This is with regards to specifically needs that were identified from, I believe, Kurt's group as a county and also the district superintendents across the county, sharing with them our need to support kids with mental health challenges. And so this is something that was piloted a few years ago, and Executive Parisi was sending out information asking for districts to see what their interest level was as he's preparing his budget for the next cycle. So Kurt, I know you've got a little bit more insight from some of your colleagues. If you can just kind of give the basic description, and then we can answer any questions.
The program was a pilot last year with Sun Prairie, Verona, and the Madison East, I believe it was, attendance area of the Madison School District. And what it is, it's a share program where the county will put in basically $60,000 per site, and then the school district will contribute $60,000 per site. And what that does is it allows, through an RFP process, that Catholic Charities is actually the provider of the person who will be the mental health provider for that school district. DeForest, on their own, put up $120,000 to buy into the program because they felt it was a worthy program to do. What the position does then is it's a crisis response. It coordinates a crisis response team for individuals, students who are in a crisis mode for whatever reason it might be. So they provide the immediate support to manage the crisis, but then what it is it's really designed as a 90-day program that focuses on getting the student and their families connected to community-based resources, which could be mental health services, it could be working with the county on the provision of some stabilization of their home, because some of these are homeless people, homeless families, or who meet the definition of being homeless. It could be other county funding or county resources for food, clothing, you name it. It can be. It's really whatever the team determines the needs are for that individual student and family to support them. It isn't designed nor intended to be a substitute for any private third-party mental health services. It's to hook them up to them, whether it be Journey Mental Health, which is the agency in Dane County that provides the ongoing mental health services for individuals on Medicaid, or hooks them up with providers if they do have other insurance. So if they're a Dean provider or Dean Insurance, they'll hook them up with the agencies in the area that accept Dean as insurance. So it's really a stabilization program, and in 90 days, the student is kind of weaned off of this support because somebody else will take their place. They don't work with more than probably, each team works with no more than probably 10 to 15 students at a time, just because you can't be effective if you have too big of a caseload. So it's a triage kind of a system that they work. And kids are constantly coming on and coming off of this system. Middleton this year will be combining with Wisconsin Heights because Executive Parisi was able to get more budget money. DeForest is going to be getting money this year as well, and then the other, Madison is expanding, and then Verona and Sun Prairie will be maintaining what they got last year. Executive Parisi would like to expand it, I think, to the entire county, but it's dependent upon how much money he can get in each budget from the county supervisors to put into this program. The districts who participated last year felt that it was a tremendous support. They did do some comparisons of behavior referral data, including suspensions, and the numbers are pretty telling. They had some schools that had reductions of 74%. Again, that's not across the board, but they did see that in some of the buildings, pretty significant reductions of behavior, office referrals, suspensions, expulsions, and the data that they kept anyway.
I think what drew us to is definitely is a need that we have. We've struggled with what our strategies are to start to address it. This seems to really be right into the direction that we need to go. What we're looking for from the board tonight isn't necessarily, you're welcome to put a vote down on it as far as approval of it, but it's not, all we are doing is putting in our interest to the county so that Executive Parisi can put it into his budget and see where it comes out at the other end. But we need to be in the pipeline if we want to receive funds. We have been approached by Lodi schools to see if we would consider partnering with them, because part of their district is in Columbia County, part of it's in Dane, and they'd like to try to utilize some of that. Pros and cons to it that are, one is it could reduce our initial exposure cost-wise. We would most likely house the person here. Obviously, would be the much larger part of that consortia, but it would probably reduce some of our initial cost to that. Flip side is that we'd be sharing that with Lodi. The model that I think that Kurt and I've talked about is Middleton doing something similar with Heights as they kick off the program to really see how it goes in their district before they expand further. So.
Okay, Jack had a question first.
Go ahead. Would that limit the number of students that we could have interacting with the program?
If you go into a consortium, you're going to be sharing that resource with another district.
Yeah.
So that's the negative.
Yeah, I really don't know what the parameters are. If the Lodi School District would be limited to only servicing students who live in Dane County, that would be logical to me, but I also know politics isn't logical, so it might not have those kinds of limitations. But if that's the case, the sliver of students in the Lodi School District that would even be eligible to participate would be extremely small, and even smaller students would probably be in need. So I don't know the answer to that question at this point in time. I know that Middleton and Heights are just getting started with the program for this year. I certainly could reach out to them and get their ideas of what that entails, but I really don't know what that means. All I know is we have to submit a request to participate into this, an application basically, which we almost did this past school year. The problem was for us to get your commitment of the dollars didn't work with our budget development process, so we didn't submit a proposal.
Last year they gave us like 5 days to
right.
turn around.
Right.
They kind of gave us it. Kurt and I talked about it, and there was so many unknowns. We just said let's hold for the year. This year gave us a lot more opportunity. Plus, we learned more about the programs when we saw it. We were interested at the beginning to move it forward.
So who puts the team together? There's one person in our, that's housed in our district, and you said there's a team that,
right.
that looks, who are
Yeah, the other team members would be staff that we currently have, our counselors, our psychologists, our social workers, our nurses, our student services staff would work with this.
Aren't we doing that now?
The part that we do not do or have access to that Catholic Charities has is Catholic Charities staff person that would be assigned to us would have the extensive mental health background that our staff don't. I mean, we're trained as educators, we're not trained as mental health providers. It's a different kind of training, and they also have more linkages and connections to those community resources than we do. We're aware of them, but they can kind of make them happen for some of the families because they're affiliated with the county, which has the resources primarily speaking.
So it would seem that the county should just put a few more staff members in there to help education. It seems like they wanted to tap into a budget for this support.
Well, I think what they're doing is they're trying to build that bridge between the school and the community. And they're using this as a mechanism and a funding source to do it. And they're limited in the amount of money that they can put, just like we are. So, and we've talked about this since I've been in Dane County about how can we pool our resources. Right. And now we actually have a model that seems to be working. Again, we only have 1 year's worth of evidence, but it's better than anything else I've experienced. And it's really also, I think, a changed mindset with the county really wanting to work with schools to solve a county-wide societal issue. So it's really a different focus than what we've had in the past.
And it was driven off of really requests based on needs that came from the schools and a consortium that was working with the county.
Julie?
Well, my guess is too, part of what this person is doing is not necessarily providing all the services themselves, but they know the links and how to get them connected to other people, which again, I mean, when we've talked with our own social workers, that seems to be a part of the thread. Even if they do know that, they don't have the time to make all of the calls and actually make all those connections really happen. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I'm sure we have the need. I don't know what I think about the pros and cons of sharing the person, because my guess would be we would have more than enough need to keep that person busy ourselves.
So there's no budget commitment on this, all you're doing is saying we have some type of interest, and if the RFP comes out, then we can respond to the RFP.
Basically, I think what we're saying is that we're interested in the program so that when the county goes forward, they're going to say, Waunakee, you're in. So it is, in essence, if it gets funded at the county level, it is a commitment on our end at this point to say, we want to do that. We want to share that expense.
So you need a vote, up or down on this.
Moving forward with it.
If you look at it from the perspective, you want to vote on it from a budget standpoint, yes.
Because it says it would be a cost-sharing program with both the county and the district.
It's a 60% commitment if you're chosen to be part of it, correct?
It's a $60,000 commitment if we are chosen to participate. We're still going to have, I highly doubt that he is going to get enough money to fund every school district in the county, because right now he only has 5. So I highly doubt he's going to be able to expand that to 20 whatever districts in the county. So we're still going to have to apply, and we're still going to have to be chosen. But you're right, if we are chosen, it is a $60,000 commitment.
And that was one of the thoughts that Kurt and I had, was if it does get competitive in that respect, the consortium with like a Lodi could potentially be a positive from that respect. But we can vet that out. If there's a preference for the board to look at it one way or another, we're happy to entertain that. But we can also kind of vet that out in the next couple of days and see what that looks like.
So is there a motion then to?
Steve, I'd just like to ask a question. Where would we get the 60,000 from?
It would be for next school year.
It's next budget.
It'd just be in next school year's
This is
budget.
for the next budget cycle.
So this, not for this year, it's for
It would
next
not
year.
be for this school
This
year.
is
It would
for
be
a
for
year.
the 17-18 school year.
Yep.
So what happens if the funding gets cut? He gets the funding, we get the program, funding gets cut. Now we went from 60,000 to funding this person.
Well, that would be a choice that we would have to make. We either stop, we either
probably
end the
would, because
program
that's the
or
way,
we commit the
government
other.
generally works.
Well, we either stop or we do what DeForest did.
And they went in.
Yeah, last year
DeForest
they,
decided to just do it on their own.
They did it on their own.
yeah, last year they funded their own full position, $120,000 through Catholic Charities. It was still part of the
Same
program. And now this year they got half of the funding that the county chipped in this year. They were chosen as one of the schools.
Wait, you think we can't do what DeForest does?
I think there's obviously a need for this service, so I move that we go ahead and at least make the application and throw our hat in the ring. We'll have another chance to vote it yea or nay once we get in, right?
Okay, there's a motion and a second by Mark. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Yeah, I'm curious on
Yes.
the consortium part, because if you don't know how this is gonna work or what you're gonna do, it's an easy way to get in at half the cost. And the next year, if you're doing, you'd have to probably reapply, but you're gonna have to do that all the time. I don't mind saving 30,000 depending on how things go. And like you say, they'll probably accept if they get 2, that looks better than they get more involved, so.
Are
It
you
would
saying
be
doing
interest-
it with Lodi? Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying?
I think you were saying you were gonna
Actually,
look
what was
into
your
it.
motion? Was it to do it with Lodi or
No,
else?
it was
Oh,
basically
I
to move
just-
forward,
Just move it forward.
Yeah, just move it forward, period.
because I think I was hearing that,
Is
you know,
this still
this.
part of the discussion then?
Yes, this is part of the discussion.
Couldn't we allow Randy and Kurt to explore the waters and see which way seems to be more appealing approach by the county?
Yep.
And which would be more beneficial for us to get in, either solo or as a co-op?
And we have to
And
see if
pursue
they would
that
allow
whichever.
that, because Lodi is splits both counties, are they
Yeah.
gonna allow that?
Well, that's the first term.
And I would also contact Wisconsin Heights and Middleton Cross Plains, who are sharing one, to see
how
how
that works.
it's going in their opinion.
Yeah, I wonder if you'd have to decide the percentage up front. Maybe you could decide the percentage based on, you used it more than 50% of the time, so whatever your percent.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their arrangement is,
Yeah.
but I certainly can find out.
So if you're comfortable with us working out that aspect of it, but we'd like to put forth the application, and if the application does come forward and we get accepted, that would be something we'd be then bringing forward.
Okay.
Okay, so, and that was the motion that was on the table.
Right.
Further? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Any announcements or correspondence?
Not this evening.
Okay. On to committee reports. There was no action, I think, on the budget committee, but is there a report from the budget committee? I mean, there were no, when I looked at the minutes, it was like no recommendations.
The main piece that came out of budget was with regards to the points, teacher points update. At the last meeting, we had a discussion about the different approaches to the banked points discussion at the HR committee. The HR committee recommended that it come back to the budget committee. Budget committee took a look at it. Steve did an analysis that is in the budget committee report from our last meeting that really outlined the financials of both approaches. And the budget committee's discussion was to then move it forward to our, what did we call it, our teachers' points committee for further discussion to try and get, if there was given the current data on that, if there was a preference from the committee and for them to make a recommendation back to the full board. So that was the outcome of the last budget committee.
Can I ask Steve a question on the two proposals? Is it my understanding that you couldn't present both options because of the HRA regulations?
Yes, that's correct. So with the downside to the HRA piece is that if that path is chosen, everyone has to be in that path, and so you couldn't do either or. So that was really the main reason for, if that one is chosen, everybody would have to participate in that option.
To me, the big difference between the two of these is, one is, first off, it's a benefit that wasn't there for teachers before, so it's a good thing either which way, and I'm glad we're doing that. That's fine. That's another way to talk to what Julie said. How are we going to keep teachers? This is a good thing for everybody. So if you do the HRA, we have the funding to do it. There's no cost to the taxpayer or the district, and the teacher gets the benefit. But if you do it the other way and you fund it through salary at the end of their one, it'll help their retirement. But that takes out of our operating funds. So you're doing one way or you're doing it the other, but it adds to the retirement for the teacher because it's going to give them a higher base for their retirement program later on.
In the same
Is that right?
breath,
Did I say that right? Okay.
In the same breath, if you were to do the non-HRA, into the retirement at the end, what you didn't spend on the HRA to cover that, you could use for new HRA costs in the next year.
Well, the HRA, we're catching up on a deficit that we have, and we're doing it at a fairly decent rate right now to get to where we have that covered.
Right.
It would slow that down.
Right.
That's correct.
I mean, weirdly enough, it almost doesn't matter which pot we draw from.
Actually, it does. One's operating, one isn't. If you're doing that in your home budget, and you go, hey, this is a win-win here, because it's a win-win there, you just go, boom, we'll do that, and it doesn't cost me from anything I want to do on the other. If you do it the other way, it's a win on one side, but it's not on the other, as per se. It's costing you out of your operating. So if you make 50 a year, now you got to make 50 plus to do it the other way. If you do it the other way, you're 50 a year, you're still good. It's just, there is some cost to it. And there is some extra benefit for the teachers, but that isn't for everybody else.
I politely disagree. Mainly because, yes, you're pulling from a different pot of money that can only be used in specific ways, but because of that money being there, it takes less money from your operating budget to have to go over there, because that fund still costs you more than the amount of money that you are talking about. So there is still operating money going over there to pay stuff, that if you leave all that money there just to work in that pot, you save more money over in your operating fund. In the end, it's a zero balance sum, right?
So, yeah, we did talk about some of the details of the different ways of doing it, and what Dave's referring to is if there's more money in our Fund 73 to begin with, and it's not used to pay for this benefit, over time, as the actuaries evaluate how much of our operating money needs to be paid into the Fund 73 to operate, that goes down. How much it goes down, it happens every 2 years. I gave one example in the board book of the difference between the last two actuarial studies. I can't predict what that would be, but the point is either option has different nuances, if you want to call it that. As Gary mentioned, they're both positive benefit changes. We really want to get the teacher points at retirement committee's feedback on the two differences to really dive into it in a little bit more detail to find out from a staff perspective, is there a really strong feeling one way or another, which we'd like to know, which we can bring back to you and present. And you know, there are differences. Gary, you did boil it down to correctly: operating funds, trust fund, and Dave, you had an accurate point that, you know, depending on what pot of money you take it from, if you take it from operating funds, your trust fund is higher, so then in the future your contribution could be lower. So in the end, you're probably going to be pretty close.
Okay, more to come on that one, once we have that coming at the group. Facilities committee, looks like updates more than anything.
The update we have on facilities is really with regards to referendum. We had a number of updates at the committee level. I mean, as you're aware, we're coming to the end of our referendum projects. I think we've had a lot of great successes that we've been able to really articulate to the point where we've had opportunity to really encompass some other projects within and needs across the district and within our schools. What we articulated in board book is just trying to outline and show to the board some of the other pieces that we've designated funds to over time. And we also had a lengthy discussion just with regards to the water containment issue at the intermediate school site and the project off of the site where we feel we have some responsibility to control some of our water off site. So the committee did authorize us to move forward with the plans with the county for the off-site work, which is in process. And the last update we received from the work going on with the infiltration sites is that they were able to hit the correct types of soils at the levels that they anticipated. So the numbers that you saw at the facilities committee are still good. So we're feeling positive about those aspects moving forward. Steve put some additional detail in here. Is there anything you'd like to highlight there, Steve?
First of all, I think this is the longest write-up I've ever done in board book. I just kept going, and eventually Randy had left, and he's like, just go ahead and add more stuff to it. And I kept going. The next day I said, I might have overdone it because I just kept going and going. Anyways, just a couple key pieces. We've hired an attorney who is working with Roxanne Johnson on developing the easement for the off-site water-related issue. We hope to have that coming back to you soon. I know the family is hoping for us to be able to present this to them soon. So that work is ongoing. The facility committee did direct us to do that, and we are proceeding. As far as on-site, as Randy mentioned, the work is proceeding. We've been successful so far with the work that has been done. The water issues have improved significantly on the site, and we are very pleased with the way that is going. We did include an update on the playground situation at Heritage Elementary School. Randy and I have been in discussions with Epstein Ewan Epstein-Ewen has been accepting the responsibility for the issue that occurred at Heritage, and Randy and I have basically negotiated with them the full cost reimbursement of the correction of that issue. We are not completely reversing the equipment back the way it was. Instead, we're making modifications to enhance each of the separate areas. We felt that was a better use of money rather than just spend $40,000 to just pull things out of the ground and move them. So we're enhancing each of the areas for $28,000. In the end, that'll be no cost to the district. In addition to that, there was information in there about where we were or where we are with the overall finances on the referendum project. We did get really good feedback from the facility committee that Randy and I have been talking quite a bit about. The feedback really was we have a message to share with the community on the referendum, the successes that we've had, and all of the work that we've been able to accomplish. And the facility committee made the point that this is a message that needs to be shared. And so Randy and I have been talking about how do we, create some type of post-referendum communication that would go out. And really we want to highlight not only the work that was accomplished that was originally intended in the referendum as described to the public back prior to November of 2014, but all the additional accomplishments that we've seen since that time as a result of budgetary savings or the use of contingency. And the list on additional projects is quite extensive. And we feel that was an excellent suggestion, and we're going to be working on trying to come up with a way to really prepare a report back to the community that really outlines what we've accomplished. The bottom line is that with the water issues at the intermediate school, we've been able to cover that, as well as all of the additional items that were presented to the board throughout the spring of 2016 within the contingency that we have identified for the projects. However, the $60,000 off-site issue may or may not be able to be covered with what's left. We do believe it can be. We have some additional dollars coming in from Focus on Energy for the geothermal system at the intermediate school. We have some additional project savings coming from Findorf, potentially in the $75,000 to $100,000 range. But as of today's date, we don't have that identified, yet we're confident we will in the next couple of months. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have had about that lengthy write-up.
Well, I did highlight, and I want to thank again the facility committee for bringing that topic up about the importance of preparing information for the public on all aspects of what you had just said. I think that, thank you. Okay, no other discussions on that committee report? Then on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight are checks, finance reports, including approval of student activity accounts, fund balance allocations, gifts and field trips, and some of the staff recommendations which we had reviewed already in closed session. I can have a motion to approve of all or pull some out separately for discussion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the entire consent agenda. Any questions on any particular items? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Board business, we have a fall regional meeting on October 6th. Make sure to let Rebecca know if you're interested. I'm actually interested, I haven't told you that yet.
Me too.
So Julie and Peggy, and I don't know what other name, basically what will happen, it's in Stoughton, and so for those who are interested in attending, sometimes we can, share a van or a carpool or something, so as the date gets closer, we can finalize that. Okay, the other item is the WASB resolution. We reviewed, discussed that at our last meeting, and thank you for your input. And I did, basically the reason that the proposal looks different than before is it's going to be submitted online, and those are the different boxes. There's going to be a box that would be subject of the resolution, proposed resolution, background, and rationale. Those are the areas. The attachments would be as as you see. And so I guess what I'm looking for is that the deadline for submitting this for at least consideration for this year's delegate assembly, actually the Policy and Resolutions Committee first has to choose of all the submissions which they want to accept or not, is the 15th, which is what, Thursday? So I would seek either an up or down vote on submitting this as a proposed resolution for next year's delegate assembly. Yep. Is there a motion to approve or not?
I so move that we approve, and nicely done, by the way.
There a second? I will second it. Any discussion on the proposed resolution? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
This was it.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. Future meetings and agendas, we have an I have HR as October 7th is the next one, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. A couple items that we want to just articulate. When we go into October, we have our annual meeting on the 17th. There's a couple things that are associated with follow-ups to the annual meeting. First of all is we need to set a budget meeting. That would be, we could do it immediately after the annual meeting on the 17th. That was something that Steve and I discussed today. The purpose of that is really to update the committee on what the actuals are based off of what we have to report for the annual meeting, and then what some of the actual pieces are that are actually occurring in some of the pieces that when we will set our levy on the 24th. So
I would say do it at the same time.
that would be great. Perfect. So we can do that on the 17th. Annual meeting is that. We then need to set a special meeting to set the levy. That's usually a relatively short meeting, just to, with that really being the sole agenda item. We're looking at October 24th as the date for us to set the levy.
How does that work for everyone?
Does that work for everybody? We can do that at any time that you do that at 6 o'clock. It's probably a
Half hour?
half hour or less meeting.
I'll be going. Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. Is that all right with you, Gary,
Yep.
if we do it that way?
Yep.
So, okay.
Okay, so we're going to need a motion to schedule that meeting. A motion to
Maybe a
schedule.
motion to schedule the levy meeting October 24th,
At what time are we thinking?
6 o'clock.
Yep.
Does it work?
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded for our special meeting to set the levy. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
A question I would, can I see your committee list? Great, so go on. Looking for a facilities meeting as well for, when are you back, Gary?
I'm back on the 29th at the end of the month. I'm gone from the 4th to probably the 11th
Okay.
in the early part of
Could we do November 1st? Is that
Don't you want one before the October board meeting too?
for facilities? Yeah, I am in the wrong month. That would help.
Like the first week in October?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Steve.
So the week of October 3rd you're looking at?
Yeah, for facilities committee. Let's start there. Let's just get one for October. So Jack, Dave, Gary.
Could we do Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday, the 5th.
I'm gone.
6th is when I have the regional meeting.
Oh, you're saying, Gary, you're done, you're at the 4th, is it?
I'm leaving the 4th.
Yeah.
October
Okay,
4th.
so the 3rd?
Oh,
Third's
what about
fine.
the 3rd? October 3rd, does that work for you, Jack? Is there a time? 6 o'clock? Okay. And the last item I just want to toss out there is, and this is something for you too, Gina, to be thinking about as far as on negotiations with WTA. I needed to find a date for that. Has your team talked about possible dates at all, or is that?
We have not, no, we have not.
Why don't we do this? Why
We
don't-
did just get, the dates of the recertification election, but.
All right. Why don't we just do this? We won't set that tonight, but we can work with you to see what dates are available, and then we can find a time sometime in October to do that. That works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, we have an HR meeting on the 7th.
We have one on the 7th, correct. Very good. That's all we have.
Okay, is that it?
Tim, just to confirm that there's a curriculum committee meeting on Wednesday, September 28th.
Everybody on that committee have that?
Is he gonna send the little thingy out for us to click yes and all that?
I will ask him.
Okay.
Yes, he is.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, so is that the last of the committee meetings?
That's it.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I'm not going to, if you're not village meetings anymore, they're too dangerous.